Okay, Karen.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is located on the table outside the door. It is also, or can be found on our website. There's also an automatic external defibrillator available on the back wall of the chamber. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Equalization. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Friend? Here. Commissioner Garcia? Commissioner Morgan? Here. Commissioner Rogers? Here. Madam Chair.
Present. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, July 26, 2022. And item B, call for a meeting and set Tuesday, August 9th, 2022 as a date for hearing on certified assessment corrections reflecting the addition of omitted property to the tax rolls or increased value on property. Is there a motion to approve A and B?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Equalization about an item not on the agenda?
Good morning.
Morning.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. This morning I want to talk about the appraisal process and the valuations as being somewhat unfair. Needs to be looked at and revised. My first complaint is having it be judged by professional real estate people who have an interest in having high prices for sales and maybe fighting against a citizen that has to go before him for a protest. The last time I did was recently, and the first question he asked was, well, don't you want to live by Western Avenue? It's a good place to be. Everybody wants to go there. I said, well, I don't think that's necessarily true. And just because their properties are really popular doesn't mean you should raise my valuations because of it. One example is there's one corner lot there on 50th, I won't say which, recently sold to a doctor at the UNMC. He knocked on the neighbor's door on Lafayette Avenue to announce to them, just to be aware, I'm going to put up a 3-car garage with a half story above for maybe the grandmother apartment or mother-in-law apartment, whatever they call it. That will increase her valuation as well as my valuation. And it's the same size lot. The basic house is bigger. But just because he makes a remodel project and addition doesn't mean that should increase mine. And a good example of that is 2 or 3 houses up from me has been remodeled over the years. One addition made. After it was sold, some boys from Creighton University took real good care of it, made lots of improvements. And oh my God, he said his valuation now is his tax is now $7,000. Excuse me. That's in the same block as mine. That pushes my valuations up, and I haven't made those kind of improvements. A 14 by 20 shed outside. But why should that push my property taxes up? I think that's all very subjective and possibly a conflict of interest by having the real estate people sitting on those as judges. The other thing is, in Dundee, every block, every street, going north or south between Dodge and Underwood to Cumming to Hamilton, are all different size, styles, and shapes. When they give me the 6 comparable properties to argue my case with, they're not all that comparable. They're all over the map with size of houses and number of bathrooms and square footage of patio areas or overhang areas, all over the map. So I don't know if I have to get a reappraisal to have them come out and measure my rooms. because I think the measurements are wrong, the square footage is wrong, overstated, then they should have to do the same thing with all of those 6 you say are comparable properties. That's the only way to be fair about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the board about an item not on the agenda? We will move to resolutions. We have resolutions D through H. We have no need for an executive session, so that can include adjournment. Is there a second? Motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I just have a quick question on one of these, and I see Mr. Goodwillie is in the audience, so maybe he could help us out. On item G, thank you. Set the 2022 real property valuations for real property protests that, one, were reviewed by the Douglas County Board of Equalization and its referees, and two, have pending reports of destroyed real property scheduled for consideration/action on or before August 10th, 2022. And I see Mr. Esch is on this, so maybe.
This really isn't ours. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor Register of Deeds Office. I know there is a tendency to pile onto our office anytime something happens with respect to somebody's property value. This isn't ours. This is, what you've got are two things going on at the same time, okay? These folks all filed regular protests. They also filed claims for a reduction in value under the statute that was passed a couple of years ago that said if your property was damaged after the 1st of January, which is normal assessment date, but you had a fire, or you had a tornado, or you had something that damaged your property post January 1, that you can also claim for a reduction in value based on the damage to your property. And they have basically a protest and one of these claims operating on separate tracks for basically the same cause of action. And so I think, and Dan's office or Catherine Hall, who oversees the referees, one or the other could speak to this in more detail, but I think the idea was, let's resolve this one today and the claims for property damage next week.
Okay, so
that these two things aren't chasing each other around.
I understand what you're saying. So this class, and there appear to be only 4
Yes.
property owners in this class, is a subset of a much larger protest class, but these are particularly, and Ms. Hall or Mr. Esch jump in, these are particular because of this damaged property
Exactly.
thing? Is that correct?
Dan Esch, County Clerk. Yep, Mike hit it on the head. There's actually, so because of the order, when you're protesting, you're basically saying my property was not worth this as of January 1, 2022. So that's why we're taking the protest this week. And then the Form 425s are saying after January 1, 2022, this happened to my property. And so that's why the order is the way it is. We're taking up the protest first, and then next week we'll take up their Form 425s. And there's actually 3 other properties as well that filed Form 425s, but they did not, those 3 properties did not also file a protest. So just a heads up that you're actually going to see 7 reports of destroyed real property on the agenda next week, but only 4 of them also had protests.
Okay, so out of all the thousands that filed protests, these are the only that qualify under those conditions?
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
No other questions or comments? There is. Commissioner Morgan?
Not of Mr. Goodwillie, fortunately for him. Catherine Hall's name was just mentioned. She's done an outstanding job of working with the referees and their qualifications as appraisers, and I just want to thank her for the work that she's done. And I know people will be getting those messages shortly, I would assume. Catherine might be able to tell us when those will go out to the people that met with the referee. And then we as a Board of Equalization should get the date when we're going to be meeting also at some point in time, so that people are aware that we would have a Board of Equalization meeting as we've done each of the last 10-plus years. Catherine, do you know when the notices might come out for the people?
Yes, Catherine Hall, County Administration. The referees' recommendations to the Board of Equalization are scheduled to be presented to you next Tuesday, August 9th. And then all those who filed protests will receive notice of the board's action on those properties to follow.
Okay, so it would be probably close to the 15th before they get them in the mail?
I believe there's a statutory deadline. I could,
Yeah,
County
we-
Clerk, I can speak to that, but yes, it'll follow immediately after the board's action.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to get them in the mail as soon as we can, but we have until August 18th, Dan Esch County Clerk, we have until August 18th to mail them out, but we'll get them out much sooner than that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay, no other lights, no other questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next, we'll move to the agenda for the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Boyle. Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Friend.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Rogers. Madam Chair.
Present. Item A, approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, July 26, 2022. And item B, approval of claims submitted for payment processed through Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion to approve A and B? Second. Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Morgan. Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
We'll move to the consent agenda, items A through F. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Rogers, second by Commissioner Friend. Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next, we have one recognition. I would ask Director Sherry Glassnap and Director Mike Phillips to come to the podium, please. This is a resolution recognizing Mr. Phillips for his service at the Douglas County Community Mental Health Center. And I'll read the resolution. Whereas Mr. Mike Phillips is a lifelong resident of Douglas County, has worked in the field of behavioral health for the past 28 years. And whereas Mr. Phillips began his career with Douglas County as the Director of Psychiatric Outpatient Programs for the Community Mental Health Center in April of 2014. And whereas he has made a significant impact in some of the most vulnerable populations in Douglas County by strengthening existing programs and creating new ones. And whereas Mr. Phillips worked closely with key stakeholders to secure an expansion of the mental health diversion program. And whereas he also had a special interest in the interface between Douglas County Corrections and the Douglas County Community Mental Health Center to ensure individuals who are released from corrections receive the best possible behavioral health care and case management services possible. And whereas his focus on a pilot project called Familiar Faces helped to significantly reduce jail recidivism for participants who had a mental illness and had been incarcerated more than 4 times in the past year. And whereas Mr. Phillips has also been an advocate for the Stepping Up initiative in Douglas County, which was launched in May of 2015 to mobilize local, state, and national leaders with the goal to reduce mental illness in our jails. And whereas he will retire from Douglas County on August 5th, 2022. Now therefore be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that this board hereby recognizes Mr. Mike Phillips for his service to Douglas County Community Mental Health Center, and we congratulate him on his retirement, dated the 2nd day of August, 2022. And I would ask for a motion to approve. Motion by Commissioner Kavanaugh, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes, I just want to commend Mike on a sterling career of public service, the people of Douglas County. And personally, I want to commend you for the great and outstanding way that you handled a really important job to the people of Douglas County and helped us in a critical area of mental health that we're all trying desperately to improve, and you've been a key player in that. I hope that in your retirement years, you stay around as a resource that we can tap into, because your institutional knowledge is unparalleled. I don't know who we are going to get to step into your shoes, but that's not going to be an easy act to follow. I want to commend you on this and wish you a long and happy retirement, and just say thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Yeah, congratulations, Mike. I just want to echo exactly what Commissioner Kavanaugh just mentioned too. And so I think it's obvious that you've made some very impressive and necessary changes to, and the programming that you've done has been very innovative. I think the most important thing to realize is that yes, you've been able to put pen to paper and kind of get things done in a very methodical way, but the thing that sets you apart is you've done it with heart. So I want to say that I appreciate that. I see that in your work. I see that in your efforts, and I appreciate what you've done for Douglas County.
Sherry?
Mike. It's like I said earlier, I'm a crier when it comes to things like this, and so I'm hoping to get through this without that. I have known Mike for many more moons than our work together at Douglas County. And so when he applied for the outpatient position, I was just absolutely delighted to bring him on board. And I knew that he was going to bring a passion with him to mental health that would be like no other individual, and that he would challenge us to think creatively and outside of the box. And Mike and I often call that sparkle, because he has that. He has the passion for the services that we provide. The things that he's done with peer support and the interface with the behavioral health and Douglas County Corrections, and he sees that as imperative, that we work hand in hand with another county facility. And he challenges us every day to think about that, all of our executive team. I'm gonna miss the times that I can pop into Mike's office and just banter back and forth about what we should do next or what we should do with a certain circumstance. I'm gonna miss walking by Jess's office and seeing him in with her, bantering back and forth about a situation and how we should handle that. I don't think this is the last we're going to see of Mike. I hope this isn't the last that we're going to see of Mike, because I believe that somehow he will, after retirement, circle back into behavioral health care services in some way, shape, or form via stepping up or some form of interface with corrections or some form of consultation. And I look forward to that and tapping into his resources in the future. And just know that everybody at the Community Mental Health Center, Mike, is going to miss you.
And Mike, I knew you before you came to Douglas County, and Sherry kind of hit it, your passion for the entire gamut of behavioral mental health. I mean, it is, and it has showed in what you have done here in Douglas County for our residents. And so I thank you so much for your service to Douglas County and to the citizens to which we serve. And even though we do want to make sure you stay connected, you are retiring, and we want you to enjoy your retirement, whatever that may bring you. And we wish you good health and laughter and lots of love during your retirement. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Mike Phillips, Douglas County Community Mental Health Center Outpatient Director. I'll say that for the last time here. And thank you, everyone, for the kind words. I mean, it is appreciated, but I think it's to recognize this isn't an individual endeavor. I mean, the work that is done is truly a collaboration with a lot of passionate individuals. I think the Community Mental Health Center, what drew me there, and how I first interfaced with that as I sat on the advisory board for mental health diversion when Douglas County first started that, and that's before the country was talking about that interface. Douglas County had that that vision or connection to see that would happen. And so as being an advisory member on that board, and it kind of sparked that in me as much, I've always kind of had a belief in helping the marginalized and being part of the safety net of our community. I've always believed it's not what we, just barely get by or do what we have to do, it's we do what we should do. And there's a saying about you judge a community by how the ones who are suffering are treated. And so I really have a lot of pride in Omaha and Douglas County, lived here my whole life, and could make a choice to leave and go someplace else, but didn't, because I really do believe and have a passion for our community and how we can lift people up. Being part of Douglas County's Community Mental Health Center really did see the role as being part of the safety net. We truly are the safety net. We work with individuals that other agencies aren't treating very well, and they are asked not to return, or a variety of different reasons and issues, and they come to the Community Mental Health Center. And having said that, sometimes community county services maybe are thought of kind of poorly, like, it's kind of the lower end. The Community Mental Health Center really is a gem. When you think about the level of education and experience the staff have there, it truly is a gem and is a tremendous asset, I think, to our county. And so just feel it's important that the commissioners hear that. And as for me, it's like, who knows what will go on. It just felt like this is probably the best time for me to hop out. I know I'm going to use a joke David Letterman says: when you retire to spend more time with family, you probably should ask your family first.
Well,
so with that, yeah, I have a 1-year-old grandson I plan to hang out a
there you
little
go.
bit more with and do some of that. And so really approaching this as like, it's a sabbatical that may turn into full retirement, and we'll see how it goes. And my wife has a lot to say about that. So thank you, everyone.
Could we please vote?
Motion passes 7-0.
And we will get a picture real quick, but we want to honor you. And if you guys could sit. Marcos, can you take a picture real quick?
Isn't there like a box? A box?
Yes, squeeze, guys. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze.
I thought there was like a box that you stand on.
No.
Okay. I think.
Can I go one more?
One, two. We get a few more. Yeah. Is there good? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, with that, we will move to citizen comments. Is there anyone in the chamber wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda?
Good morning, I think.
Morning.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette, Omaha, 68132. Again, I want to center on the Open Meetings Act for a number of reasons. We now have a new revised one, but it's hard to tell exactly why it was revised. Maybe just to put a new date on it, but maybe to have something to do with the mayor wanting to be out of town. It would be nice if you would inform us as to what was revised by putting it in italics, because it is hard for an average citizen to decipher the legalese there. I want to center specifically on statute number 84 of 1412 and a couple of the paragraphs after that, and particularly in relation to what happened to me last week. The term reasonable in terms of language and rules is used quite often in this act. But what is reasonable to a lawyer is not necessarily reasonable to a citizen at the podium. However, subject to the Open Meetings Act, the public has a right to attend, a right to speak at meetings of public bodies and all or any part of a meeting of a public body, except for closed sessions. It shall not be a violation of this section for them to make and enforce reasonable rules and regulations regarding the conduct of a person attending, speaking, et cetera, et cetera. What happened last week, I think, was a very severe violation of the Open Meetings Act, but maybe mostly because every one of the bodies has different rules that they think are reasonable based on the lovely lawyers that you have giving you advice, but it's not necessarily reasonable from this meeting to the next meeting this afternoon. For example, the right ability to hear and speak. Hear is part of that. I have no problem in this meeting. I can hear every one of you and the people at the microphone. For some reason, every city council meeting in the afternoon is extremely difficult to hear everybody because they will not set it to their microphone. Or the system breaks down between the morning and the afternoon. But I was told it's automatic. But I have to bring that up every time. Now, last week, I tried to get up because they were closing a meeting after they had withdrawn something and put it to the discussion later out of the consent agenda. They have 3 or 4 consent agendas. That's confusing. I thought I was within my right to stand up and try to get attention to say, excuse me, you're supposed to ask for those 2 items. Are there any comments from the citizen? They did not. I objected to that. He objected to me. So I went into my little act about excuse me, I couldn't hear you, Mr. Festerson. You run so fast through what items you're going to cover or not cover out of that consent agenda that a citizen off the street this morning will not know what the hell you're doing. They might have to stand up and ask you, excuse me, what items of those are you going to let me speak or not speak on? You need to slow down and repeat it. This body, I think, is the senior body, like the Senate. You're older and wiser and maybe have supersedence over the city council. So I suggest that you get together with them and make your rules, their rules, similar to yours.
1 minute.
Easy to understand. And the same way with the Omaha Public Schools, completely out in left field. Now, they have a copy of that Open Meetings Act posted on their board from the National Association of School Boards. And now even our governors and our school board association wants to pull out of that National Association of School Boards for lots of reasons I don't have time. At least you don't have a copy put out to you by them. However, the National Association of Counties is a similar type body that sits out there in the wonderland and gives you information for you to use in your meetings against citizens. You get paid to listen to us, not to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is John Cannon. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Association of County Officials, otherwise known as NACO. The good news for me is that I'm accustomed to speaking quickly, and with 5 minutes, I find that typically goes fairly quickly. I wanted to come visit with you all and just give you an update as to what's going on at NACO, our NACO, Nebraska NACO, because 3 of you are at the National Association of Counties annual meeting recently, and they're also known as NACO, of course. So I always feel the need to distinguish between the two. So first and foremost, I will talk briefly about NACO and the annual conference. That was a good time. I think it was a lot of very good information that came out. Certainly I would, and I'm not being paid by the National Association of Counties, but I'd certainly urge each and every one of you to attend those sorts of meetings that they have when you can. There's a variety of them during the year. One thing I will mention about the National Association of Counties is that when the CARES Act came out a couple of years ago, and we all remember how that went, there was a whole bunch of funds that came to the state of Nebraska. Those went through the state, and there were supposed to be no strings attached to get them to the local subdivisions, political subdivisions of the state. And this is not a criticism of our governor, but along with a lot of other governors, he said, we're going to attach a few strings. We want to make sure this money is spent correctly, and it's spent toward those things that are going to be a public good. I know from my position that we received a number of questions and complaints and a number of other comments about how the CARES Act funds were distributed. And so when it came time for the second round, because we all knew there was going to be a second round of funding that came along, the National Association of Counties worked very, very closely with Congress, the U.S. Treasury Department, to make sure that those allocations were going directly to county governments. Frankly, a historic amount of money that got sent to county governments from the federal government. And if I won't ask for a show of hands, but if any of you have ever heard or said, we send all this money to Washington, D.C., and we don't get the same value back in return, this is one of those times when we did get that value back in return. And so I thought it was something that, in particular, the National Association of Counties deserved a certain amount of credit for. I will mention that with Douglas County's allocation of $110,973,572, when you compare that to the $10,342 you guys pay in annual dues, that would take care of 10,730 years of annual membership with the National Association of Counties. So I would suggest that that's a pretty good investment. And again, they're not paying me to say that. A few things I do want to mention as far as what's going on at Nebraska NACO, since that's why I'm here and I'm almost halfway done. So in this next legislative session, we've got a number of issues that are going to be challenges for us. First and foremost, I will mention the inheritance tax. I know that Douglas County uses that in a way where it essentially supplements the general fund. And one of the things that we've been preaching when we talk about the inheritance tax is that if you eliminate or you reduce the inheritance tax, that acts or is going to operate as an increase in property taxes. And when I talk to state senators, I say, when you're on the campaign trail, how many people complain about property taxes? Every hand goes up. When I say how many people are complaining about inheritance taxes, very, very few hands go up. So I think when you're looking at what our priorities are as far as the legislature is concerned, those are the sorts of stories that we need to be bringing forward. I'm going to ask for your help. I think I'm a charming individual. Not necessarily everyone in the legislature believes the same, but they are going to listen to you. Douglas County, you've got a number of senators that have a claim to territory in Douglas County. They're going to listen to the things that you bring to them. The stories that you're able to tell with what you do with your inheritance taxes are going to be crucial in the fights to come. And so I would recommend visiting with your state senators directly. I would recommend letters to the editor at the World Herald. I might even suggest, like an editorial that might be put into the World Herald as well. The second thing I want to talk about is something that recently passed in the legislature, and that is the postcard bill. And so I'm sure that your assessor has mentioned something to you about it. This is a situation where any political subdivision in each county that goes over a particular allowable growth percentage has to be a part of a
1 minute.
Has to be part of a joint public hearing. And if they're a part of that joint public hearing, they have to go onto this postcard that's going to be sent to every affected taxpayer. I can tell you that we testified against this at the legislature. When it got out onto the floor, we started pulling out all the senators that are typically sympathetic to us when it comes to tax policy issues. Every single one of them said, how do you vote against the tax transparency bill? I said, okay, our goose is cooked. We're going to work with the introducing senator. I'm not going to say it's a good bill. We were trying to make what we did not like to be 10% less bad. And there's a process in place. I've been hearing from assessors across the state and clerks across the state that they're not particularly fond of it, but it is a workable process at least. A couple other things I want to mention because Candace told me to mention them. We have a legislative conference October 28th in Gering. I would invite all of you to come. If there's things that you think need to be on the agenda for NACO to bring to the legislature, that is the place to do it. Our annual conference is December 14th through 16th in Kearney, and I'm out of time. And love to talk with you. I gave my business cards to Dan. I hope he passes them out. I am your employee. This is not any kind of special trip that I'm making. If there's anything you want to talk about, I am obligated to answer to you and be down here anytime that you want me to.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much.
All right. With that, anyone else wishing to speak to the Board of Commissioners about an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move to our presentation. Presentation of the 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline. This will be presented by Kyle Kinney, who is the Program Manager for the Nebraska Family Helpline. Good morning and welcome.
All right, good morning. So my name is Kyle Kinney. I am the program manager of the Nebraska Family Helpline, the state program for parents and families when they're needing mental health and behavioral services as a 24 crisis line, as well as the program manager for the 988 Nebraska crisis line, which I'm here to talk about today. Long story short, because time is of the essence, of course, we have a suicide and mental health issue in our country, and that has only grown through the pandemic. The ironic thing is the 988 transition really began before the pandemic. The pandemic just sped it up, if you will, at least from the need perspective. Why this is becoming important, why the transition is occurring, is nationally in 2020, there was approximately one suicide every 11 minutes. In 2020, people aged 10 to 14 and 25 to 35 years old, suicide was the second leading cause of death. And from April 2020 to April 2021, over 100,000 people died from drug overdoses, whether intentionally or unintentionally. In Nebraska specifically, it is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34. That's right, age 10, second leading cause of death is suicide. It's the fifth leading cause of death for ages 35 to 44, the sixth leading cause of death for ages 45 to 54, seventh for 55 to 64, and 18th for 65 and over. Overall, it's the 10th leading cause of death in Nebraska, and on average, there's one death by suicide every 32 hours. So it is clearly an issue. It's a public health issue. It's a mental health issue. It's a substance abuse issue, and really has become the priority nationally. Where this came out of is a federal thing. Federal legislation mandating the rollout of 988 as the mental health and suicide crisis number nationwide was to occur by July 2022. That process began in 2018 by the FCC in conjunction with other state agencies to study what that transition would look like. A lot of that came out of the state of Utah, which had begun a statewide transition from a crisis hotline to more of a crisis lifeline, really mirroring the 911 infrastructure. In 2019, the FCC reported to Congress recommending that approval for the 988 Easy Dial code, and in 2019, it was designated. In 2020, they finalized the rules and order to make that possible for the July 22 transition to occur, along with approving the text accessibility for crisis services through texting into 988. So it comes out of federal legislation. Here's what the transition really means. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline has existed for 30 odd years, and it's been a national program overseen by SAMHSA and Vibrant Emotional Health. And you have local crisis centers providing those services with that national oversight, as well as a national backup network. As it relates to Nebraska, the Boys Town National Hotline has been the lifeline provider since 2005, as well as the initial national backup center. So let's say you're sitting in Illinois and you call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and your local center is overwhelmed, it would transfer to that national backup center for that backup support. And so we've been providing those services since 2005. What the federal legislation is doing is it's transitioning that suicide prevention lifeline, so that 1-800-273-TALK, the number that we've seen put through the media every time there is a celebrity death by suicide or a crisis, a pandemic. You see that flash quite a bit, a bit of marketing and communication that's gone on. It's transitioning that long-digit number to 988, as well as creating that infrastructure to really mirror a 911 response, but for mental health, substance abuse, and suicidal crisis. And so it's more than just the crisis phone number. It really is a system. And this initial, what happened July 16th was it transitioning the first step into the 988 short code to a local crisis center. And so what happened for Nebraska is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline transitioned to 988, and all those calls would then route to Boys Town. It's the first pillar. It really is a transition. It's easy to think, oh, 988 happened and it's done. That's not what has occurred. The first step was that someone to call, and that needed to be in place by July 16th. And so as of July 16th, folks that called 988, they routed to the local crisis center. There's about 200 across the country. Again, Nebraska's in a pretty good place because it's one crisis center. So they're all going to route to the same place and make easier than routing and connection to local services from that standpoint. The second pillar is the someone to respond, and that's the mobile crisis, and we'll talk about that. And then the third pillar really is somewhere to go, and that's the psychiatric ER, the crisis stabilization units, things along those lines. So we'll talk about those specifically. Where are we at now? So with that transition on July 16th, anytime you call from a Nebraska area code, 402-531-308, it's going to route to the crisis counselors operating the 988 Nebraska Crisis Lifeline. Those crisis counselors are going to work to de-escalate the caller, whether they're in a mental health, behavioral health, or substance abuse, suicidal crisis. They're going to assess safety, both from suicidality, lethality, as well as homicidality. They're going to work to safety plan, and that's the meat of the work, where we could take someone who's in, has a suicidal thoughts, has a suicidal plan, and safety plan so that they can remain safe in their home, in their community, without having to utilize those more intensive resources. Once that safety planning has occurred and everybody's in agreement that this is a safe situation, we're going to do some resource navigation to connect to local, personal, individual resources, whatever those might look like, whether that's mental health, substance abuse, peer support, something more intensive. It's going to be really identified with what their needs are. And then we're going to follow up. And so we schedule a follow-up call for anybody that has that current suicidal ideation to ensure that we've continued to remain safe, but even more that they have navigated those resources. They've been able to connect with a therapist, or they've gone in for their assessment, or they've been able to get their medication refill achieved, those kinds of things. Because that follow-up piece is where we don't have to continue to increase moving up the ladder of need, if you will. And then finally, one of the things that has become part of the 988 that wasn't there under the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is the ability to activate mobile crisis response when it's appropriate. So instead of having to call for maybe a welfare check or something along those lines, or hope that they're just okay, you can send out a therapist team who can go out and obviously assess the situation face-to-face, de-escalate, and then put aftercare services in place. And so those services have been available in Douglas County and the Region 6 behavioral health area since 2012, and have been able to be accessed from a youth standpoint through the Nebraska Family Helpline. The transition to 988 has allowed the availability to be more than just law enforcement at this point. So that's been a nice development there. So what is the need for Nebraska? So prior to the July 16th transition, as communication, as awareness has gone on of the coming transition from the Suicide Prevention Lifeline to 988, calls from Nebraskans have increased, and much like it has across the nation. You can look in January, the calls from Nebraskans to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline started right around 900 and has worked up to well over 1,000 the month prior. For the first month where it was active as 988, we're well over 1,200 calls for the month. And so it is continuing to grow. Since the July 16th transition, we're up over 60% on daily average. So folks were aware and certainly have utilized the new old service, if you will. From the national perspective, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline is proven to work. The Lifeline studies overseen by SAMHSA have shown that after speaking with a trained crisis counselor, most callers are significantly less likely to feel depressed, to be less suicidal, to be less overwhelmed, and to be more hopeful. Again, those are all those markers you're looking at to not needing to escalate and utilize more intensive services, and that's ultimately the goal. That second pillar that makes up the 911 or the 988 system is the someone to respond, and that's that mobile crisis response. And so these teams of crisis responders are overseen by each of the 6 behavioral health authorities, the behavioral health regions across the state, with teams designated to specific counties. So in the Douglas County area, that's provided by Lutheran Family Services. And again, they've long been a partner to the Omaha Police Department, Douglas County Sheriff's Office, as well as community providers like the Nebraska Family Helpline in providing the youth response, and really have partnered then with OPD and Douglas County Sheriffs for their co-responder program as well. With the 988 transition, the goal is to continue to expand those teams, both from a utilization standpoint, because I think if you would talk to Douglas County Sheriffs or Omaha Police Department or us at the hotline, we want this to be utilized more, because not only one is if I have a choice between sending out a law enforcement officer or a therapist team, I'm going to pick therapist team if it's safe enough, right? I mean, you got to guarantee safety for everybody involved, including the person. If they're in the act of suicide or have done something, then we need emergency medical, right? Like that didn't go away. But if we can avoid getting to that point, I would much rather send a therapist and their team. And so expanding the utilization is very much a goal. Additionally, utilizing different modalities, increasing the face-to-face. Telehealth really was able to quickly develop with the pandemic, so that was in place, as well as utilizing phone and centralized locations, particularly when we get to that third pillar of having somewhere to go. Utilizing and tying in the co-responder models, so what is occurring with the Omaha Police Department, with having co-responders in each of the precincts as well as at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, where those licensed individuals are responding with law enforcement to those 911 calls where it's highly suspected that mental health is at play, as well as their ability to follow up with some of their frequent callers to 911 who are very much more having perpetual mental health issues. And so partnering with them is that overall system. Tying in peer support resources to the mobile crisis response system, where the therapist goes out, but also a peer responder, someone who has that lived experience that can connect with them and then become that follow-up service and help them navigate both the services, but also be that support person, that is literally in their community. Because we're all about taking the phone calls at the crisis line, but if there's someone that is actually in their neighborhood, that actually knows them and can put face-to-face and has a personal relationship through that peer support system, that's much better. I mean, it's always better to have a named face, a known face, than a nameless face. Additionally, wanted to develop the post-crisis follow-up. I know Lutheran Family Services and Heartland Family Services and the rest of the Region 6 area have a number of services that become available through the mobile crisis response. Stuff like assessment, evaluation, free therapy, those kinds of things, ability to access medication management that just are part of accessing that system. And so continue to prop and increase that across the state. And then helping them as they navigate those services for the long-term support that is needed post-crisis. One of the things I think that is needed in those next steps is having that someplace to go, the vision for that. This is more brick and mortar. Crisis call center it's been around since, 89. We had mobile crisis. It's been readily active and available since 2012. Needs grown, needs beefed up, needs available, needs utilized. But the somewhere to go is this is where the work is going to happen. Looking for those services like crisis receiving, crisis stabilization. Those are developing. There are options, but they're not certainly readily available and certainly not readily available statewide. Utilizing things like bed registry and direct referrals into services from the crisis hotline perspective. So when someone calls in to 988, the ability to navigate directly into a service. So there's things like open beds. Those are being piloted across the state. I know that Region 6 is currently piloting the open beds platform that ideally would become part of that someplace to go. Having that same day or next day assessment, outpatient, and medication management options, that's in development, and that's a capacity issue. There's more need than there are providers. Omaha is, from a Nebraska perspective, Omaha is service rich, but at the same time there are still shortages in particularly medication management and same day assessment. Those are not readily available. Growing the mental health and substance abuse crisis respite for youth and adults. For youth, this is really not available. This is very much a brick and mortar that does not exist, and so that is a long-term goal and plan under the 988 system. And then finally, peer-run hospital diversion and peer-run crisis respite, whether that can be tied into the call center response or the mobile crisis response, or even someone that's housed within the psychiatric ER or the PES or those types of facilities where they can catch at the door, if you will, and divert into a less intensive, less costly type of service that is going to be able to provide the safety and stability as well as, all right, what really is going on with this crisis situation. That very much, the somewhere to go becomes more of a vision than a current reality. So where are we at right now? On July 16th, it was, let's call it a soft launch. We transitioned the national hotline to a localized crisis lifeline. And that is very much was the goal in that initial. What are we working on right now is the ability to respond to crisis calls, texts, and chats. We're currently operating 24/7. And so the ability to maximize response and coverage and connections to all the services. The long-term vision is one where the system provides more opportunities for crisis services. Again, the parallel is very intentional between 911 and 988. You call 911, you're automatically guaranteed law enforcement, emergency, medical, and fire. When you call 988, the goal is parallel response. They don't always need law enforcement, they don't always need fire, and don't always need emergency medical. So what are the parallels to that? Again, we're starting with someone to respond, the mobile crisis, and places to go. It took 40 years for 911 to fully implement across the country. I did not realize that. I learned that in the last 6 months. I've learned a lot in the last 6 months. It's going to take 988 time to develop as a system, but it can't take 40 years. And so that's very much the goal as the state of Nebraska. From an infrastructure standpoint, like I said, transitioning from the national perspective of SAMHSA and Vibrant, they're then working with each individual states through their divisions of behavioral health to oversee the local services. So I operate out of Boys Town. I answer to the Division of Behavioral Health with DHHS as they're the contract manager and contract holder for the 988 system for the state of Nebraska. And so if you have any interest in learning more about what the implementation process has been over the last 18 months, I very strongly encourage you. You can go to the website on the link, but you just hit 988 Nebraska. It's the only website that's going to pop up. You can look through the different the meetings and presentations that have been provided, as well as all the documentation. Or if you're just like, I'd kind of like to have some cards to hand out, you can print from there or request materials from the DBH as well that you could to provide. I know they're currently getting a large boxes of cards to hand out to law enforcement. Specifically, is they're often the times where they're responding to a scene where it would be better where they were talking to 988 than law enforcement or anything like that. So that's really where things are now. I do welcome any questions or comments or however I can be helpful in understanding what this transition has begun.
Well, thank you, Kyle, and that presentation was perfect, so thank you. We do have a couple of lights. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Just to start, could you forward us that PowerPoint that you just...
Absolutely. I'll send it to Marianne, and that'd be the easiest way to distribute it. Sure. Absolutely. I will also comment, there's a very similar version on the DHHS website that is it's a little longer and has a little bit more detail if you're like, I want all the information. I pared it down a little bit for this audience and this time allocation, but you can certainly have both.
Thank you. So these statistics that you give us on suicides are chilling. With Nebraska coming in at 1 every 32 hours, that's over 300 a year. I think that's more than car accident deaths. It's up there, anyhow. And what I'd be interested in seeing is, to map trends, you have to look over time. If you had information, say, looking back 5 or 10 years, of where we are on this, it's sad that it's even that high, but I'd like to see, are we up, are we down, are we about staying the same? And I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but I'd like you to send us that.
Yeah, I think I think maybe a better resource to give you that it would be the Kim Foundation, because they track the local stats specifically. I can certainly give you the kind of the national trends and those kinds of things.
Do you know off the top of your head Nebraska's trend?
I don't know the long-term trends. I know Here's what I do know from the Suicide Prevention Lifeline operate out of Boys Town, so for Nebraska response, as well as the Boys Town National Hotline, so a national youth response. You go back 15 years, suicide didn't make a top 10 issue. But in the last 15 years, it's now 1 or 2 as far as why people are calling. And so when you talk about going all the way through from experiencing suicidal thoughts, is there probably a general understanding that folks are talking about it more? Yeah, I think that's occurring. I also think folks are asking for help more. And so I think all of it's probably up if from that standpoint. But
I appreciate that. I'd be interested in the actual numbers
Yeah.
of suicides if you have that available, please.
Yeah,
share that with
yep.
us. If you were to call 988, first of all, where are you calling? Is there a phone bank someplace? Is there a 911 center someplace?
Yeah,
or-
so there's a crisis call center. It's housed on the Boys Town campus, and so there's a number of different crisis counselors. So they're bachelor level crisis counselors that are trained in crisis de-escalation, suicidology, Nebraska resources and services, parenting, families and systems, and
Okay, is that 24/7?
24/7.
And you indicated that you're working for Nebraska HHS, right?
The program does. I'm an employee of Boys Town as the program manager for the system.
Okay, does Boys Town have like a grant with Nebraska HHS?
It's a contract.
Contract?
Yeah, to provide the crisis call center.
And is this specific to Douglas County, this operation of Boys Town, or is it larger?
Statewide.
Statewide?
Statewide, yep.
So if I call from Scotts Bluff, I get the phone bank
Correct.
at Boys Town?
Yep, and so then we are connected to all the service systems through the 6 behavioral health regions. So the state is broken up into 6 behavioral health regions that then coordinate the services for those regions, including the mobile crisis response teams, but as well as the youth and the adult mental health, substance abuse facilities, as well as in the private systems.
So at this call center at Boys Town, how many of these crisis counselors are there at any given time?
So for the 988 Nebraska program, at any given time, it could be 5 to 7.
1 minute.
And I may have to come back with a couple others. The funding for this on an annual basis, what's the budget for this?
So that I'm going to defer you to the Division of Behavioral Health for the overall budget. I don't have that information.
The idea here, I guess, is that you talk to people on this crisis thing, but then you mentioned that you'd like to see some referrals where there are actual places where they go. I think you said bricks and mortar places. Do those exist in Douglas County right now?
In some capacity, yes, and some no. So when you're talking about the psychiatric ER, a manual, you would have that. You would have the PEZ or Safe Harbor from a crisis stabilization unit for adults. From a youth perspective, by and large, not publicly accessible. You have some that are privately accessible through like the probation system. CSI has 1 bed for privately accessible shelter, that kind of thing.
Time.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Boyle?
So thanks again for the presentation. I'd like you to continue along what Commissioner Kavanaugh was going on, since he and I both have some operational types of questions. So it's about what do you do with those folks who don't have a bricks and mortar system to go to?
So right now we would refer to community-based services if that's what they're needing. If mobile crisis isn't able to prevent reaching that, let me back up. So when a caller calls, if the first thing when we're talking about assessment is what's the risk? Are they at risk of suicide or homicidality, where there's thoughts, there's a plan, they have the ability to act on those things? We're assessing kind of along those things. If it's moved past the ability to safely intervene, at that point then you're looking at the emergency intervention systems. But if it's less than that, if we can avoid getting to that point, we're looking at mobile crisis that's going to go out and connect to existing services like mental health counseling, psychiatric assessment and evaluation, medication management, utilizing those services. It is the someplace to go is harder to navigate, and so then it's how do we safely plan to manage them in the home, and so utilizing the existing case management type services for that.
it seems like a huge undertaking. So when I look at 988, I'm trying to figure out again, I do more visual things. I almost need like an algorithm or an organizational chart to say where 988 falls. To put that type of responsibility on a 988 system is it's huge. So I guess I'm having a hard time seeing how you can accomplish all of the things or have the intervention be effective over time.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I think about the 911 system and all of the
Right.
partners that are involved in supporting that and providing for that. The same thing will have to happen for 988. There will have to be state partners, county partners, city partners, private partners to make it go, just like you would with the 911 system. It's the only way. And so when you look at the state support, the head, or if we think about org chart, would be the Division of Behavioral Health, partnering with the Crisis Center, partnering with the Mobile Crisis Team. So again, in Douglas County, that'd be Lutheran Family Services, partnering with facilities like Emmanuel, the PEZ, the existing ones, as well as what is the gaps within communities, but also then statewide. So yeah, all of those partners are going to have to be involved all along the way. When you look at the national models for the 988 and kind of the expectations from the federal legislation, it very much provides for some specific things, as well as here's things that are useful depending on what your state looks like. Because a model for a very populous state versus a very rural state versus a very self-contained state, it varies quite a bit. So really looking what is going to work for Nebraska as we develop that full system.
And I'm assuming over time that these volumes are only going to increase because of the ease of remembering something like 988. So is there, are they able to handle the volume at this point? Kind of what are plans for growth?
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to have both 18 months, and we only had 18 months to look at the transition. Yeah, we have planned for a fair amount of growth, and so yeah, we're able to meet volumes at this point. I think there's definitely a number where it would exceed, but I think we're within projections right now. So I'm comfortable with our ability to respond from a crisis line perspective.
Good. And then going to the crisis line again, Commissioner Cavanaugh alluded to this. What are the credentials of the folks that are handling these calls?
Sure. So they're bachelor level crisis counselors, trained, and then they're overseen by licensed mental health practitioners. So I'm a therapist. We have clinical supervisors that are licensed mental health practitioners, therapists.
All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan?
Thank you very much. On getting the PowerPoint, maybe Karen could give you the email to send it to, so then we can get it out to the commissioners and some others. How long have you been in this kind of work?
Sure. So I've always been a human services professional. I've been a therapist for a provisional, then a licensed therapist for 12 years or so. I've been working at the crisis line since 2013 with the Nebraska Family Helpline. I was the clinical supervisor, then program manager there for the last 5 years, and then have taken on the 988 Nebraska program with the transition. So the 988 Nebraska over the last probably 6 months or so.
Really, I really respect your efforts and what
Thank
you're
you.
doing and trying.
I have a really good team and really good partners, so it's very helpful.
I'm sure. When you mentioned the beds available that someone's, near suicide, UNMC, CHI, Methodist, do they have? And maybe I shouldn't ask the question, but I'm wondering if they have beds.
I would have
to you call or what?
No, so we don't currently have the ability to access their bed registry. So that's when we talk about that open beds pilot. That's kind of the goal, is that folks like us would have the ability to navigate those open beds. But I don't currently have that, and that's in development. So I don't know exactly. You'd have to ask them directly.
So there's not a number that you can give someone. This would be a number to get the right help.
Oh, yeah, we can, yes, we do have the ability to connect them, but as far as, there's a difference between saying, all right, we need to go to the emergency room, and since most of these are typically a psychiatric, they would go to a manual from an Omaha, Douglas County perspective. So certainly can go there. Whether there's going to be a bed available, I mean, they're not going to release someone who's unsafe. So I mean, they have very good safety protocols. But as far as how readily available, those kinds of things, that's going to vary. I think they would tell you there's more demand than there is availability. At least they certainly do in the presentations of theirs I've seen. So
My understanding is, I've heard it several times, that at 72nd and Mercy Road, where they've taken down the southeast corner office building that was there on Mercy Road, they're building a community mental health facility there. Have you heard about that?
I'm familiar that it's being built. Yeah, it's being built. Yes. It'll be, again, like any service, how will it be accessed and how will we partner with it?
Right.
I'd say that's probably a little bit downstream at this point, but yeah, we'll partner with anybody to help it easier for the callers and the folks in need.
And also maybe give Karen Cole your phone number so that if we wanted to come see your operation at Boys Town.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I would
Go there.
We'd always welcome a tour.
We were there for church last Sunday. We really appreciate all that Boys Town does for the
Thank
youth
you.
and been at some of the homes and so on.
Mm.
So that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you again for the work you're doing to help
Thank
and
you.
assist people.
No other lights? Kyle, I just want to point out a couple of things that what you said is, you know, we did have the Boys Town hotline up and running, and this transition to 988 was actually really smooth because of that, and we thank you for that. But we do have to build up, and we talk all the time about what that capacity of services is that we need. We also are real excited about trying to increase the peer support program.
Thank you.
Yes, that was a program that we launched onto quite quickly.
Yeah.
But with some changes from DHHS, we have to kind of backtrack a little bit, and so
Okay.
hopefully we can get that back on track. Because in my opinion, is having someone with that lived experience respond to someone who's having that experience is far more instrumental in getting them de-escalated than if we were sending law enforcement or someone who doesn't know really what they're going through. So we're excited to get that started, and we understand it's going to take a little time. Things don't happen overnight, and as you said, it was a long time for 911, but we are on the same page that it can't take that long for this, and it won't. And but we're excited to get things going and started with that building of that capacity and program. So again, I thank you very much. I will ask if there's anyone else in the audience or on Zoom that has any questions or comments about this presentation. All right, seeing none. Again, thank you so much for being here, and we appreciate all you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kyle. With that, we will move to our first public hearing, our resolution to approve a special use permit to operate a major home occupation on approximately 1 acre of residential property, specifically firearm sales and transfers. The address is 10220 North 187th Avenue, Bennington 68007. This public hearing has been continued from Tuesday, June 7th, Tuesday, July 12th, Tuesday, July 26th. After this public hearing today, this board can take action if they so desire. So with that, I think we'll start off with Dave just again giving us a brief background of what this request is and kind of launch the conversation from there.
Dave Forrest, Planning and Zoning Coordinator for Douglas County. Thank you very much. This applicant, Quentin Erdman, came before the Douglas County Planning Commission in May of this year, and at that time the commissioners approved to recommend that to you, this body, that a special use permit be granted for a major home occupation for firearm transfers, limited amount of sales. And as you said, you've continued this several times, so Mr. Erdman's here today to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Erdman is here. This is the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Erdman or Mr. Forrest? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
I just have a kind of an informational thing on the types of guns that would be available for sale. Would these include assault weapons?
Sorry, would you like me to introduce myself first?
Yes, your name.
Sorry. Quentin Erdman. I am the owner of 10220 North 187th Avenue. As far as your question, the types of guns vary between handguns and semi-automatic rifles or bolt-action rifles. It would be, the transfer part would be simply be doing the paperwork for whatever firearm was shipped to me to complete the ATF requirement. As far as my own personal sales of firearms, I don't have any in mind at the moment. I do know that amongst my law enforcement friends, the semi-automatic rifles are kind of what's in vogue right now. So I would anticipate some of those.
So, just so we're clear here, under this permit, you would be allowed to sell assault weapons, yes?
Semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah.
If
Is that correct? Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Friend?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quentin, so, Mr. Erdman, sorry, is an ATF, if you're a registered ATF dealer, is that synonymous? Do you have to have a federal firearms license?
in order to do what I would like to do, yes, you do have to have a special.
So
class
if there
license.
were, saw a number, based on some of the information that we received, let's say there's over 800 ATF registered dealers in the state of Nebraska. Every one of those has a federal, every one of those individuals or organizations has a federal firearms license, correct?
If they're engaging in lawful transfers.
They're
yes.
synonymous. So
Yes.
in order to get an ATF registered dealer license, you have to be you have to have a federal firearms license,
Correct.
right? Which order do those come in? Or are they all at the same time, right?
The next step for me would be to apply for the actual federal firearms license. Once they would grant or deny that, if they grant it, then I would be a firearms dealer.
Okay. If you violate the parameters, if you have an ATF required dealer approval and you have a federal firearms license, if you violate, and this is kind of broad, but if you violate any of those parameters or guidelines, would that be a federal offense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Boyle?
So thanks again. I know this has been a kind of a long process, and you've also met at one of our committee meetings separately from this too. So, and first and foremost, I want to say your credentials are absolutely without question. I was wondering with the transfer permits, would you still be able to do what you do if we put a restriction on it to state that you cannot transfer assault rifles?
I would still be able to do handgun transfers and bolt-action rifles, shotguns. So I would be able to do those type of transfers.
Types of transfers, okay. I think, to be honest, just personally, I have an issue with transferring assault rifles out of a residential neighborhood, and so that's my biggest thing. I completely, like I said, your credentials are without question. I think if I were to choose someone to do this type of business, it would be you. If it were in a business setting, I would feel less concerned. And so, but like I said, that's probably my biggest issue, to be honest with you. So thank you.
Commissioner Friend?
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Mr. Erdman, so I don't have a federal firearms license, and I am not an ATF registered dealer. If I wanted to sell a gun, a weapon, whatever you want to call it, and assault weapons is a strange word, because I can assault somebody with any kind of weapon. So there's a lot of information flowing around out there in public, and my colleagues, we've talked about this on various occasions, and it's valuable discussion. It really is. But what I want to ask is, if I wanted to sell a gun that I have in my house to a neighbor that I've known for 10 years, does the ATF know about that transfer? Is that illegal according to federal requirements right now?
Private sales are permitted. You would not be required to notify the ATF, as far as my understanding. Only if you were to engage in regular commerce, I believe that would fall under the ATF regulations.
So just so we're clear, just so we're clear, when I make that transaction and I sell it to my dad or my friend sitting next door, the ATF does not know about that transaction.
Correct.
Okay. That is what some would call a ghost purchase. Okay. Now, look, I'm not going to opine. I've had years that I could opine on stuff like this, and the funny thing about it is, all of us as policymakers have opinions on this type of thing. But the interesting part about this is the opinions on this type of thing are ideological, and arguably, we as a board do not have the statutory authority to dig arguably too deep into those ideological issues in order to either prevent or allow someone to have this capability. What we have, arguably, is the ability to say, let's look at your developmental or the development density, the height and the bulk of the stuff that's going on in your house, setbacks, building coverage, frontage, parking, landscaping, building design, traffic capacity, operation hours, waste disposal, stormwater management, utilities, and all of that consistent with the comprehensive plan. So here's the thing. I love these discussions. We can go ideological all day long. But the bottom line is, if you get this, the ATF, the federal government, knows exactly what you're doing. That's what I want. As a responsible gun owner, and as somebody in this community that doesn't want ghost purchases, if we can help it, that's the type of thing that I want. I want the responsibility. I want the track record. I want the paperwork. And I would assume that law enforcement and a lot of other organizations would want it as well. So I'll end my diatribe with this. If we don't do this for you, can you still sell a gun to somebody? Forget about the.
Sure,
if you didn't have a federal firearms license and you weren't an ATF registered dealer, could you still sell a gun to somebody?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you whether you would or not.
Sure.
I'm just saying you could still do it.
Legally, I believe I would be allowed.
Look, everybody on this board knows what we're dealing with here, and I respect all of their opinions. I would say, if we wanted to actually dig in and prevent people from doing the type of things that we know are dangerous, we all are capable of it, and we all should run for the legislature. Either that, or we should run for the House of Representatives, or we should run for the United States Senate, or we should get people together and actually fundamentally, practically change our Constitution. Because this is not a Second Amendment argument. This is an argument that says, how are we going to watch you? You're asking to be watched. You're going like this and waving your hand. At the end of this, I'm going to make a motion to approve this, and it's because I want to know what you're doing. And I think that we have the capability to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Boyle?
And it's really interesting, and we all know that Commissioner Friend and I differ on a lot of things, and this is one of them. But what's very interesting is we both chose the same quote out of an opinion on why we feel the way we do about things. So in that item, criteria used for approval includes for a special use permit needs to be consistent with, among other things, which you all mentioned, setbacks and things like that, with the comprehensive plan of the county. And to me, comprehensive plan includes public safety. So public safety to me means we try to avoid assault rifles getting into the hands of individuals in neighborhoods. And so, and we can go down a long street to talk about what it would take for our sheriff's office, for OPD, whomever, to monitor that type of thing. So, so the bottom line is, because I see it as a public safety issue with the transfer of assault rifles, it's the assault rifle issue that really gets me, as far as what we're supposed to be doing as county board members to ensure public safety. So the bottom line is, if I were to approve this, it would be with a stipulation on there about assault rifles. That's just where I think, when taking a stand on public safety, I think that's where it is. So.
Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you. I know that County Attorney's Office spent some time reviewing this topic for us, as many of us had questions. So specifically on the matter of the potential, the hypothetical of putting such an amendment to this motion of restricting assault rifles, for example, or one specific type of firearm. Could legal counsel weigh in on that in regards to, is that a stretch of jurisdiction? Is that rightfully within our jurisdiction, as specifically commissioners that are voting on a zoning permit, a special zoning permit?
Teresa, you're at County Attorney's Office. I'll give it a try, and if if I need help, I know there's assistants here in the audience who worked on this. So the comprehensive plan that you use for zoning is not really geared towards or focused on this type of restriction. It is more towards traffic congestion, setbacks, and I know there are additional things that you could, in that context, there are additional things you could look at for this special use permit, like adding lighting outside the home, restricting the number of folks who come, at what times they can come, can it only be sold during the day? Those are all geared towards maintaining the character of the neighborhood in the context of things like traffic and setbacks. And so that's more how the plan is currently written.
That was my follow-up question regarding the legalese of what comprehensive plan refers to, but specifically the matter of adding such an amendment that I mentioned a bit ago. Would legal counsel say that is within our jurisdiction, or a stretch?
To ban the sale of transfer, to ban the transfer of assault weapons?
Specifically, one type of firearm like assault weapons.
It doesn't seem to clearly fit within the other types of items that the plan is really geared towards, that, like, being traffic and things of that nature.
Thank you. I probably have another follow-up question shortly, but I'm gonna allow others to speak.
Commissioner Morgan?
Just following up on what Commissioner Friend said, ATF would be notified any time that you sold a weapon and what that weapon was and who it was to, and they'd be registered. Is that correct?
So I don't want to provide false information. My understanding is every time I would conduct a transfer or sale, I would be required to complete a background investigation on that individual, which is a national.
Maybe put the mic a little closer so everybody can be sure to hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
As to my understanding, every time I would complete a sale or a transfer, I would be obligated to complete a national instant background check on the individual. That would go through the FBI, I believe, manages that system, and it's stored at somewhere. As far as what the ATF is concerned, is that I am obligated to keep a logbook of all firearm transfers, the type of firearm, who it's going to. I'm obligated to get some form of identification from the individual. Specifically, handguns are required by the state that that person have either a concealed handgun permit or a handgun purchase permit issued by the county. I would have to verify that, make photocopies of that, and all that information would be retained and inspected by the ATF firearms inspectors on whatever basis they would choose to do so.
And that's the answer that I thought you would give, but I wanted to at least have it stated by you. The other part of that is, if you start to sell some assault rifle or whatever you sell, a weapon, and don't report that, I think you'd almost be automatically serving several years in one of the penitentiaries, as I understand it. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir, and I would take it one step further. Given my profession, I would throw all of that away for a $10 transfer. So I would not be in the business of doing that. Not only are there criminal penalties, but I think there are also severe civil fines associated with failing to abide by the terms and conditions of the ATF license.
And you wouldn't be seeing your children as often?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to be supportive, and much of that is because of exactly how you've gone through the process. You're someone very responsible and know all of the ramifications, and they're going to adhere to every kind of safety and law that you're required to. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to briefly comment before we jump into a vote here shortly. This one is definitely a tough one for me. On one end, I definitely have strong reservations for having more assault weapons in the community in general as well. And if I were, somebody who was in Congress or a state senator who was asked to vote on an assault weapons ban, I would vote yes, and I'm okay saying that publicly. However, right now I'm in the role as a commissioner voting on a permit for a business that is a legally allowed business by the feds and all relevant local and state law. So this one's a tough one for me. I know that within the type of business role you are striving to do here, you're gonna, of course, conduct those background checks on individuals. You're gonna document every single firearm that is transacted through you. And I believe we were told that there's 86 other such businesses and individuals conducting this kind of business in the city of Omaha realm. So it's not something that's necessarily out of the norm that you're applying for. Again, it gets to of course, it touches on the broader societal issue of should certain kind of firearms even be in the hands of the average everyday citizen. Of course, there's been recent tragedies that pull at our heartstrings quite a bit, some of which really affect me, like Uvalde, for example. I have little girls that are about the same age of that tragedy. And so, of course, this is a tough issue, bigger picture. But again, I have to ask myself, what is my role right now in this moment as a commissioner, and what am I actually voting on as far as a permit goes? And so with all of that in mind, I will be voting yes on the permit itself, while also supporting Congress individuals and state senators to tackle the broader issue of gun violence and not having assault rifles in the hands of the everyday citizen to commit tragedies such as the ones we've seen in recent history.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Teresa Yerrick?
Teresa York, County Attorney's Office. I had a question for Dave. I apologize for asking and putting you on the spot. I know in one of the prior hearings we heard about some of the safety measures that the applicant has at his home, a gun safe and a vault, and I was wondering, are those actually part of the special use permit at this time?
They were not part of the recommendation from the Planning Commission, no.
And I would just suggest to the board that if you wanted to, you can always add additional conditions to a special use permit. For example, coming back and reviewing in a certain, like a year or some other period of time, just to make sure that the board is still comfortable with the special use permit as it fits in the comprehensive plan. But also, I think there are some safety features perhaps the board could consider and adding to the special use permits should it want to, that are already in existence on the property but not required. So the special use permit doesn't require any of the things that you heard about, and would that be something the board would want to consider? And I think the applicant might be willing to just continue measures that he has and not remove those, but that might be something to discuss or consider.
And if I may, just to give you an idea of what security places I have already in place, I have exterior lighting. If you had the opportunity to drive by my neighborhood, you would realize it's very secluded on a dead-end gravel road. Obviously, I have locks and I have a video security system in addition to, I just recently installed a home monitored security system. So the particular room itself is a completely concrete surround with a steel metal door that also has a panic alarm on it now, that if the door opens without me knowing, will set it off. So I'm hoping that helps assuage any concerns about the security I have taken to make sure that the firearms are secured. Just, I know this was brought up at another meeting. One thing I intend to do is whichever shipper would be shipping me the firearm, I'm going to set up an account with either FedEx or UPS to have them hold it at their facility. So then instead of taking it to my residence at a time when I would choose, I would go to that facility, acquire the firearm, and directly transport it myself to my residence. That's, I think, logistically the easier thing for me to do and will provide the most security.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I have a question about process. So the special use permit, and if there's conditions that want to be added to it, do those happen when? Because this is a public hearing, and so we can't take any action during the public hearing, but once the public hearing closes, there'll be a motion, and then is that the time additional stipulations are put on the table to be voted on?
That might be a legal counsel question, actually.
Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. I do recall one prior incident where you did do that. You closed the public hearing, and then that particular instance that I'm recalling is you added a time frame to come back and review the special use permit. So you made an amendment to the special use permit, added a time frame, and I believe that you then voted on it, took action on it.
Okay. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Regarding that, if we did a time limit on these special use permits, I understand that a similar permit to this may have gone through without any discussion sometime earlier. And the idea that I'm entertaining is for a special use permit, we have, I don't know, a time limit whereby you'd have to come back for review by this board, well, renewal, like you would on your driver's license or a million other things that we do with the government. Would that be a possible action that we could take? And if we could, would it be retroactive? So we make a change in the special use permit criteria for everybody, and then going forward, everybody complies with that.
Teresa, York County Attorney's Office. I would think it would be forward-looking, not retro-looking, but I think for purposes of today's hearing, and we can certainly look at that for you, Commissioner, but for purposes of today's hearing and this special use permit, I recall you all putting a time limit on a renewal for a special use permit in the past. So I think you can do that, and I think the plan allows the board to add additional conditions to a special use permit.
So we have done that on
I do recall you doing that at least one other occasion.
Okay, but in general, there is no time limit on special use permits.
I would defer to Dave, but I don't believe there is. I don't believe there is a specific time limit within the process as it stands right now.
No, I don't believe it's a requirement, no, in the regulations.
Thank you.
So back to that process again, though, can you, during this public hearing, tell us what as laid on the table, what the special use permit, quote, conditions are right now, if any?
I can't, and I think maybe my best recommendation is that unfortunately we continue this to the next meeting and we draft a revised resolution for your consideration, which includes the conditions that you'd like to vote on.
Thank you, that's what I wanted you to, because I mean, again, there is nothing, really. I mean, right now, there is nothing before us, and if we start to add something, what are we adding it to? So, again, this is a public hearing, I get that. But I think we need to have, especially from the conversation, just a little bit more time to put those conditions on. I do have one question that was, when Commissioner Garcia made the statement, but, there's 86 locations in the area right now to do this type of transfer. Not all that and I can't find which ones are home and which ones are business, but the bulk of them are businesses. And so I'm kind of with Commissioner Boyle that I don't know if this is, quote, the correct thing looking at our comprehensive plan for neighborhoods. So I'm still struggling with that. But I will hope that, again, just a little more time, we can put some stuff on. Obviously, have a conversation with you to make sure that those are doable with you, and then go from there.
May I make one comment?
Uh-huh.
When drafting any conditions, especially if you're going to request me to renew it, I just respectfully request a clear guideline on how you would like me to approach whoever to put in the request to renew it. I'll obviously follow whatever regulations you require, but just so it's clear and concise, so I don't miss a date or anything like that.
And you have your ATF license now, or does that come after, which makes really no sense, but.
So this is a requirement of the ATF in order to grant me the license. They would not grant it until I had county approval to conduct business at my residence.
But you have applied.
I have applied.
It's just kind of sitting there.
Correct.
Waiting for us to decide. If that's going to be granted, then it goes to the ATF saying, yes, the county granted it, and now you will get your ATF license, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right, so with that, no other lights. Again, Tracy Eric? Or was that a leftover?
No, I just hit it again. I apologize,
Okay.
Commissioner. Tracy York, County Attorney's Office. So are we going to continue it one more week? And then I would ask that the board would make a motion.
Has to
and-
be 2 weeks, because we don't meet next week.
no.
Oh, no, we meet next
No,
week.
we meet on the
It's
9th,
week
but not the
after.
16th, if I
Yeah,
recall.
That's right.
So I would just ask the board to do as it has done in the past, and that would be motion and second to continue it on the record.
Right, okay. So with that, is there anyone else, again, in the audience on Zoom wishing to speak on this during this public hearing? Okay, so we will need a motion to extend the public hearing one more week to August 9th.
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Any further questions or
Can you
comments?
speak additionally after Mr. Parliamentary?
Yes, because now there's a motion, so you're going to be speaking on the motion
Okay.
to hold over for one more week.
Okay, thank you, Madam am I recognized?
yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I always have to ask her because she got 3 rings on her left hand. If she gets mad at me, there's going to be a mark on my forehead. Yeah, look, I respect the will of this body. Obviously, I will. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't know. I don't see any reason to delay it, folks. And here's my reasoning. If we're actually going to put parameters around this that I think are going forward, I'm not an attorney, but if we're going to put parameters around this that going forward are going to meet statutory muster, I think that I'd be okay with that. But what I heard from the dialogue and the debate during this discussion is, with all due respect, I think people are talking about assault weapons. And here's the thing, an assault weapon is a term that's pretty ubiquitous right now. It's all over the place. And I think, in my opinion, it's been created by popular culture. Because an assault weapon, a military-style assault weapon, is a weapon that you squeeze the trigger once, and it fires like 15 or 16 shots, depending on the magazine that you have. One time, you squeeze it, and the bullets just fly out. That is my historical understanding based on my historical reading of military history and all this stuff, what an assault weapon was originally meant to be. But like I said, our society has taken that term and attributed it to an AR-15, for example, which I would squeeze one time and one bullet comes out. That is a semi-automatic weapon. If we try to wrap parameters around that, we've got constitutional issues, we've got statutory issues. So if this body, it's a smart body, if we come back and we try to lay those type of requirements on there, I think we're spinning our wheels. So if we decide that we want to tell Mr. Erdman and others going forward that they can't do it past 11 o'clock at night, I guess I'd be okay with that. But I'd like maybe some folks to weigh in about their mindset and thought process in regard to not just what I laid out, but why we're delaying this. I mean, it seems a little bit, just in my opinion, it seems a little bit kind of like, well, we're kicking the can down the road. Mr. Erdman's going to get this, but he's got to wait again. I don't know. It's been almost a month. So I don't know. Chris, she left. She must have got mad at me. Okay, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Morgan.
I've never met Mr. Erdman before or spoke with him to the best of my knowledge. And I'm not trying to be nice, but you seem to be the exact kind of person that we should have in this business, and so responsible. And I appreciate all your patience. I don't think we should wait. I think that if in the future there's some things we want to do, I think Mr. Erdman would talk with us about that at any time. And I just think we ought to move on and get this thing done. And when we close the public hearing, I'm going to vote not to, extend it, to take action today.
Okay. There's a motion and a second to extend it?
Yes, to continue the public hearing for 1 week. There was
Okay.
a motion and a second.
Please vote.
And, I'm going to stop the voting because Commissioner Borgeson is away right now. And the motion does not pass. We have 3 yeses and 3 nos.
Okay. Let's go back. So the question is right now, if there's going to be stipulations, those stipulations have to be put on right now. If not, there's no stipulations.
Make a motion and we close the public hearing.
That's a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
A second to close the come on.
Dave Forrest, Planning and Zoning Coordinator. I just spoke with Mr. Erdman. He has no objection to delaying another week to give the commissioners time to put some conditions or consider some conditions and put it in a written form that you all can review and then come back next week and vote up or down. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Right now, there's a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Without doing it.
So I apologize, I had an emergency I needed to attend to right then and there. So process-wise, I'm going to ask the attorney, can we revisit that motion, or do I have to make a new motion?
I think the motion on the, and I'll look to Chris, who's our parliamentarian. I think the motion on the floor right now is to close the public hearing.
Right now, the body would have to agree to, it's in control of the body would have to agree to take this motion off the floor.
Yep, take it off the table or off the floor.
And then we could go back
You can go
to
back, yeah.
another motion to hold it over for a week?
I agree.
Okay. And who made the motion? And so I guess, so I'm looking at both of you.
I'll withdraw my second.
I'll withdraw the motion, and I just think we should try to get this over with. And I know Mr. Erdman's going to work with us, and I think he demonstrated again, hey, he's fine to wait another week. But I'd sure like to see us go ahead with this. As I said before, he seems to be exactly the kind of person you'd want to be in this business.
So with that motion withdrawn, is there another motion on the floor?
I move to approve.
Well, no, we're in the public hearing still. So is there another motion, or no, we have to, is there a motion to extend the public hearing for one more week? Right, but do we want to make another one since the other motion was withdrawn? Okay, thank you. And is there a second? There is a second. Okay. Any further comments? I just appreciate that. And Commissioner Morgan, I understand the need to kind of move this along, but just because of where we are in society today, I think it behooves us to take as much time as we need to feel comfortable with this. So thank you for withdrawing that. So with that, please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Garcia abstaining, Commissioners Friend and Morgan voting no, all other commissioners voting yes.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Erdman. With that, we move to a new public hearing for Class C 125066, licensed beer, wine, distilled spirits on and off sale for Countryside Venue, LLC DBA Countryside Venue, 330 West Reichmuth Road in Valley, Nebraska 68064. Manager application Sarah E. Norman Rowe, 2104 Pleasant View Lane, Bellevue 68004. This is the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak during this public hearing? Seeing none, I will close the, did you want to speak during the public hearing?
I just wanted to say that I'm Chuck Odo, and I'm the owner of Countryside Venue in Valley, Nebraska. And Sarah is here as far as, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Okay.
I will close the public hearing. What is the will of the board?
Motion? Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Friend, second by Commissioner Rogers. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. It passed.
Thank you.
Public hearing for class number D 125090, license beer, wine, distilled spirits off sale only for Casey's Retail Company, DBA Casey's at 4027 3110 South 204th in Omaha 68002. Manager application for Crystal Carter of 1616 Northwest 54th Court in Lincoln 68528. This is the public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to speak during this public hearing?
Good morning, I'm Crystal Carter. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Any questions or comments during the public hearing? Seeing none, what is the will of the board?
Oh, Madam Chair.
Oh, I closed the public hearing. Sorry. Close the public hearing. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Rogers. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you for being with us. Next, we will move to committees, the first being the budget report as presented. Oh, okay. Next, we have an ARPA funding, the approval of a resolution authorizing an award of $75,000 to the Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance of Metropolitan Omaha for restoration of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Memorial and Monument at 24th and Lake Streets.
I move to approve.
Any questions or comments? All right, this, so I get it right, this is being sponsored and out of the investment of Commissioner Rogers' ARPA funds. With that, any further questions or comments? Please vote. Jim? Oh, sorry. Next.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next is the monthly fee report from Douglas County Clerk. That's just an acceptance of that report. And before we go on to the last Finance Committee, I'm going to jump down to the Community Service one. Resolution to authorize the submission of a grant application to the Nebraska Recreational Trails Program in the amount of $250,000 for the purpose of funding the design and construction of Phase 1 of the West Maple Road Trail segment. Dave Forrest is here, or was here, but we have had conversations, and Commissioner Boyle, this was, you had on your committee as well. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
So we just had a committee meeting where we talked about how we're going to extend part of the bike trail segment. So we have some funding, matching funds for the Papio Natural Resource District too. So with that, I make a motion to approve.
Did you second? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Rogers. Any questions or comments? Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Now we'll move back up to our last Finance Committee agenda item, and that is the discussion/action to utilize Carlson West Pavandra Architects for Phase 2 of the Mental Health Space Study. As you remember, we all were given the report of Phase 1 about 4 weeks ago or so, and we are here today to kind of hear what people thought about it and whether or not there is support for moving forward with the Phase 2 as outlined in the study. And so with that, I will open up conversation as to what commissioners' thoughts are on the study. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Thank you. And I see that Mr. Pivovar is here. Maybe he could come down and we could discuss this. The original report contained a number of options, but I don't think that any of us had input into that, and I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I think when we discuss this, Mr. Pivovar, and you might want to identify yourself for the record.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner. My name's Al Pavandra. I'm with
Pavandra, sorry.
That's okay. I'm with Carlson West Pavandra Architects, 5060 Dodge Street.
When you were here before, Al, we discussed this input from the board on the initial report, and I think that your answer was there was no input from the board on that.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. And I'd be concerned that in this second phase that we have those discussions. Is that anticipated as part of your work on this? That we
I would
have?
encourage it. I would encourage workshops that engage more people, specifically the county commissioners. Originally, when we started the study, it was really kind of a corrections-based study.
Right.
And then it kind of, during the discussion of of going forward with that first phase, there was a discussion to make it broader and get the community mental health in here. So that's why there's options. The option was to do a combined facility, an option to do a standalone community, and an option to do the corrections-based mental health.
Right.
The intent of the phase one of the study was to define the need and sizes and potential costs and locations. So this part is if it goes forward, is to provide clarity and a single direction to go forward. And again, it's a complicated issue. There's a lot involved in the costs and not only building costs, but staffing costs. So
I appreciate that.
I would encourage more involvement.
And along those lines, it might be good to have some public discussions on this second phase as we go forward. And so I would encourage not only that we have individual discussions from the commissioners on the various options, but that we have some public input as well, because I think there's a vast pool of public resources that we need to tap into to get the best outcome. And particularly, just so that we're focused, on the question of, and again, we talked about this when you were here before, does anybody in the United States, as far as we know, combine their mental health facilities with their corrections facilities as anticipated in one of the options here? And at that point, I don't believe you were able to give us an example of that, but those are the kinds of questions, that we would be very, very interested in addition to what are the resources on our massive public health campus on 42nd Street that could accommodate a portion of this, people not involved in the criminal justice system, receiving mental health services. We already provide some on the county-owned 42nd Street campus, which wasn't quite as expansively outlined in the initial report. We had drawings of a proposed building at the corrections campus downtown, and no similar drawings of any possible alternative at the public health campus on 42nd Street. So those are the kinds of things that I'm very, very interested in getting in this phase two.
1 minute.
And we'll come back to make sure that we have the best product and the most input and clarity and transparency going forward. And I know that you're eager to get the best product out there. And I, having worked with you before, appreciate the high quality of your work. And I'm just trying to enable that in this second phase to get us the best quality. We have time and we have resources available to do this. And so, my I guess, interest would be to do it right rather than quick. I've seen quick slapdash studies done in government before, and they usually end up with wrong type of results that are expensive and not very efficient. We have the time to do this correctly. Mm-hmm. We have the resources to do this correctly, and I'm encouraged. We'll come back. Thank you.
Can I respond to a couple of points there?
Hold that thought,
Okay.
and let me go on to Commissioner Morgan first, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Commissioner Morgan?
I wanted to yield to you, but they'll come back. What's the cost for this next phase?
That's the big issue, and it's to be determined on what's in it and where it's at. And again, is it a combined facility? Is it a single facility? What's the site cost? Are we acquiring new property? Are we putting it on county-owned property? Those are all the issues that need to be studied to get to a point where there's a consensus to go forward.
Okay.
Commissioner, we did outline some relative costs, and the floor plan that was shown in the study was a generic floor plan if it was a brand new facility on a vacant site. And so that's probably the most costly scenario possible. But there's a lot of ways that you can build a really outstanding facility on one of your campuses potentially that will reduce costs, use available resources like kitchen services, et cetera, that will help get that project down lower than was outlined in the study as potential costs.
And do you think we'd be looking at, in this study, possibly, so that we're exploring every option? I always like to do that and also have a backup plan. But do you think there's some buildings that could be adaptable at a cost that might be not prohibited?
I think that's certainly possible. When I proposed this, I proposed this second phase to be looking at options: no new development, don't do anything, a new co-located mental health facility, a separate community mental health facility, and a separate corrections mental health facility, and then just develop a corrections-only facility. So can it be an existing building? And again, to answer your questions, I'm going to kind of get back to, we did research since our last meeting together whether there was a co-located facility. And surprisingly, 4 years ago, Pennington County in South Dakota, which is Rapid City, created a care center. And it's a really unique facility. I suggest that maybe there'd be a tour process as part of the study. It's a co-located facility that's run by the Pennington County Sheriff Department in cooperation with and jointly with the Pennington County Mental Health Facility. So obviously, you have some different governmental agencies. You don't have a sheriff running your corrections, et cetera, but it's a similar thing. And it was really innovative. It engaged everybody in the community. It engaged all the mental health practitioners. It included support from the sheriff. They went to help fund it. They went back to hospitals who were intaking mental health patients initially. It asked them to, we're going to build this care facility. Give us some money back, so we were going to reduce your burden, and we're going to take that intake process into our facility. They renovated a building, and then they added to it. They renovated a building in a 2018 project, renovated it into 2019, and so. That's one facility I suggest you look at. Not that you would accept everything that they did, but I was really impressed with how, and I have not toured it myself, but reading about it, I'm really impressed about how they engaged the entire community and really made a big difference.
The other thing, I would hope we could look at is hopefully a partnership, because the county doing it alone, and I am not supportive of seeing it be a dual facility. I mean, a community.
1 minute.
Plus what it is. I have, and I think you use the word stigma.
Right.
To it.
Right.
I have the same feeling. The other thing that I want to be careful about is, I know when this isn't temporary, the finding of people today for these jobs is a real challenge. And I think we've got to be certain about that, and that's why I think the partnership could be very helpful to us. Thank you very much, and do appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rogers?
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me clear up something that I'm hearing in the language, because I'm not interpreting this. Now, we have a current corrections facility. In a current corrections facility, well, let me step back. My understanding, the intent of all of this, wherever we decided to do this, it would be a new facility. So all the costs that we have associated in the budget would be, were costs that we had now. The cost would be building the facility, some other things, but it's not like you're adding new costs in. So I keep hearing the term like stigmatizing and putting together combining a mental health facility with a correctional facility. That is a correctional facility across there. Did I read somewhere in there? Because I didn't. So is it here somewhere in a footnote that we are going to build a building and connect it onto a correctional facility? Because a correctional facility cannot get reimbursed from Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
A correctional facility cannot get reimbursed from any cost because of federal law. So that would defeat the purpose. So Did I read that somewhere, or
No.
is that it?
There is, in the phase one study, there are no conclusions.
No, but I mean-
There are just possibilities.
But it doesn't say, it says it says it's basically two options, but basically like three buildings, an option to build two separate pieces or one together. This is not, I didn't read that to interpret, and I didn't see anywhere in there saying combining a correctional facility, because the correctional facility would be what it is. What I interpreted it as is having a facility where you would take community mental health people together. I mean, you would pretty much serve community health and mental health in that facility. It's not a correctional facility. I didn't see anywhere in here advocating building a correctional facility. Am I in fact interpreting that? I mean, no matter what your recommendations is, I did not see building a correctional facility.
So there's a couple of components to that answer, in my opinion. One, you have inmates that are come in and they're sentenced to a term, or they're pre-sentenced, and Mike can explain this much better than I can. But there's also detox inmates that come in for intoxication, and the facility that I was talking about in Pennington County, the sheriff runs a portion of this care facility, different from his jail. The diagram that I showed basically created a co-located facility where you would actually have the sentenced individuals housed there, as well separated the community mental health individuals. That's one possibility, but that creates a lot of issues. The Pennington facility is basically a big diversion program. It takes inmates that are coming in to the jail, and they're being diverted out into a co-located facility. And a lot of it's detox. And again, I'd like to understand how that works exactly. But that's part of the study, is to figure out what to do. The biggest problem that I've seen that Douglas County has is that the correctional facility, Douglas County Correctional Facility, is not set up for the great overwhelming amount of mental health inmates coming in, whether they're maximum security or the low-hanging fruit that can be diverted.
That's my point. No, that's my point, just for time's sake, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's the point I'm trying to ask you.
1 minute.
I did not see in here, I mean, the term was used that we're combining a mental health facility and a correctional facility. And these assumptions are being made that you're creating a correctional facility. No, you're basically creating a way to take the mental health, individuals with mental health issues out of the jail. That's what I'm interpreting. So I want to just saying that, to knock that down, is that it's getting portrayed like, we're creating this that we're creating some of stereotyping and putting people together. Right now, the fact that you have mental health in there is putting them in a framework, putting them in a facility where people have committed crimes, and they haven't committed a crime other than being, and it's not a crime, but they have a disease, a mental health disease. What I'm saying is, your study is not saying you're building a combined facility. It's building a mental health facility to serve people that just happen to be mentally ill coming from out of there. Thank you.
Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I had a few points I wanted to comment on, but let me follow that stream of thought real quick, just for my own clarification as well. Looking at page 22, for example, in the study, option 1, co-located, where it says combined community and correctional mental health facility. In one of the bullet points stating corrections mental health housing would be 76 beds. Can you walk us through, perhaps you or Director Myers, walk us through, what would that look like? Would it look like somebody enters the larger main correctional jail facility first, and then they're deemed to need mental health services and a bed and qualify for this location and program, and therefore they're transferred to that mental health correctional bed, or maybe I'm completely off, but what does that look like? Could you walk us through that?
So that's to be decided on. For instance, Commissioner Chris, when you talk about corrections mental health, that's a wide gamut. It's in my opinion, it's if someone commits a serious offense, but he has a serious mental health problem, he's in the jail. If he commits a burglary, an assault, shoots somebody, whatever, but the root cause maybe was a really mental health crisis. He's adjudicated. He's in that facility, and so that's way at the top of the line. And can this new facility, if it's a co-located facility, include that? Potentially, yes. I haven't seen an example of that. What I've seen an example, and again, part of that 76 beds, includes some dormitory space for detoxification. So they're adjudicated. They're coming into Mike's facility. They're either in pretrial or they're sentenced, but they're there. That's the low-hanging fruit. They can go into a dormitory. That's part of that. So what this study and what the participants need to decide is if it is a co-located facility, or if we're doing an addition for mental health at the correction center only, and we're not doing anything with the community combined there. Those are possibilities that can happen. I'll let you address that too.
Absolutely. Commissioners, Michael Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. And yes, Al had that pretty much head on, where there are individuals who at any particular moment have to be in jail because of their status in the criminal justice system, and they may also be acutely mentally ill. None of the jail has been designed to house people with acute mental illness, yet half of the footprint of the most recent edition of the jail is all housing people with serious mental illness. They are already here, and this gives us an opportunity to have a specially designed space that's more therapeutic, where we can stabilize individuals, takes the pressure off of the existing housing units that we're currently staffing with double staffing because of the needs of the individuals in those housing units, and be able to allow us to connect with, if it was co-located, with community mental health resources right on site, so that there's that continuum of care. Mm-hmm. There's also the opportunity in instances it is not uncommon at all for individuals with serious mental illness and they're charged with a crime, to within a period of time have those charges dropped under a Board of Mental Health petition, and having the opportunity to have the people who can provide the care while they're in custody be the same people who can provide the care when they're still acutely mentally ill but no longer criminally charged, is, I think, another potential advantage for us.
So the individuals in this co-located facility, the hypothetical option one, they're still under corrections?
Yes, on that portion of it, there would be no direct connection in any way, shape, or form between individuals who are in custody and individuals who are not. Mm-hmm. The idea is that the staff, the psychiatric staff, can move freely back and forth. The individuals cannot.
But one half of it, or more or less, would be for people currently in corrections.
Okay. Yes, that's correct.
Got it. Thank you. And I'll come back with a few more, but thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Mike, can I borrow that for a second? Oh. Just following up on Commissioner Garcia and some of the other comments regarding this. On the initial phase 1 report, page 22 that he was referring, the option 1 is a co-located option. And as a matter of fact, there's extensive discussion on option 1, including on page 25, a drawing of a proposed bricks and mortar facility that would co-locate people charged with crimes or serving time with mental health conditions, and people not charged with crimes, just with mental health conditions, in the same facility. This is a picture of a single building that would co-locate both of these people on the campus of the jail downtown.
Doesn't say that.
Well, this building co-locates people charged with crimes or serving time in a facility with people not charged with crimes and seeking mental health things. That's what option 1 and the drawing says. My point is, there is, in option 2, a separate option, which is take the people charged with crimes or serving time for crimes behind bars and treat them in a mental health facility on the corrections campus, the jail campus, and then take the people who aren't charged with any crimes but have mental health issues and treat them someplace else, like on our public health campus on 42nd Street. But I don't see any drawings or renderings relative to option 2, and like I do on page 25 for option 1.
Right. Let me.
I just, because of time constraints, we'll come back to all this. I'm just pointing out that, there was extensive development of the option 1 thing and the phase 1 thing, and I'm not saying that it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying in phase 2, we're going to be interested in as exhaustive a study of what we can do with a separate campus for people who have nothing to do with the criminal justice system. They're just mentally ill people. We already have a campus that treats people like that on 42nd Street that the county owns. And we have facilities on that campus that could be repurposed for those uses so that they aren't co-located with people charged with crimes. And this is where the stigma comes in. I don't think you have to be too imaginative to say, if my brother, sister, husband, wife, whatever, was mentally ill and needed treatment, that sending her to the corrections campus might have a negative stigma attached to it. I think most people would see that. The idea of treating them like we treat them now on a mental health campus, which we own at 42nd Street, or in any other mental health facility in the city, none of which are connected with the jail, is the preferred way and the standard way in the medical community to deal with it. I've had a lot of discussions with people in the medical community here locally and nationally, and nobody recommends that we combine people not charged with crimes in a facility, as outlined on page 25, with people charged with crimes. And I understand that the staff would be treating the people charged with crimes like they would treat the people in the correction center. They are guards, they're in jail, they're charged with crimes or they're convicted of crimes. That's not something that we want around people who are simply mentally ill and seeking services. We currently have that campus on 42nd Street treating many, many, many of these people, hundreds, thousands a year. And the facility is more than prepared to deal with these without putting them in a corrections campus, as outlined on page 25 and as discussed on page 22. Just saying, going forward to phase 2, I'm more concerned about doing that, and there's no real outline of any of that in the one side of one page proposal that we have before us today to initiate phase 2. And perhaps if we had a little more information, I mean, I think I have a comfort level, but there might be a better comfort level for the folks in the community of proceeding on what is necessary and
time. Commissioner Friend?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I talked to a few of the commissioners and other people about my high-level process about, I mean, we've been inundated with paperwork, of course, and had a lot of discussions. I'm no different than anybody else sitting on this board, but here was what my thought process, and something I actually communicated to Commissioner Borgeson yesterday, is I do believe that the funding and the financing that we received from the federal government in the latest ARPA award should be directly related to community mental health in this community. So my feeling is once we've developed that strategy and we get to a point where we know how we're going to be able to afford it and what we're going to be able to do, I want that money earmarked almost for this particular process or this thought process. This has been woefully needed for 35 years. So we're heading in the right direction. My thing is right now, if we did, based on some of this discussion, set up a dichotomy between pre-adjudicated and adjudicated individuals, a dichotomy between those individuals that are being treated for acute mental health issues and also people who are, for lack of a better way to describe it, using a facility for healthcare or retail-based type of, retail's a bad term, just a healthcare-based type of community mental health. The big question, it seems like right now that we're two key questions that we're trying to weave our, well, let me slow down. Weave our way through is, A, where do we do it? Is that dichotomy going to exist? Are we going to create that dichotomy? And C, when we decide we're going to do it and we have that strategy, how can we afford to pay for it? Corrections, I'm looking at Mike, Corrections Department, 16 employees down. We have nursing shortages in Douglas County. We have all kinds of issues. 911 has major shortages. Those are the first line people, right? Somebody's got we've got all of these issues we're gonna have to deal with until we get a strategy put together that deals with all those issues. And I think that would include the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I think it would include CHI. I think it would include Children's and Methodist Hospital. They need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and see if they can help. And then finally, the community mental health agencies and services that are currently existing and providing those type of things in this community and how they might be able to be contracted with us and help us. Because if we do it, if we just do it, my fear is 20 years from now, I'll probably be long gone. I think it'll fail. I think if the government, I think if the county takes control of this, we'll follow Cook County, we'll follow Ramsey County, we'll follow all these other people, and we'll find misery. That's what we'll do. By the way, finally, 1:30, it won't take that long, I promise, Madam Chair. We have a medical, I call it jokingly, but it's true. We have a medical industrial complex in this county. We have a huge medical infrastructure here. UNMC is a behemoth, and they're good at what they do. Now, all they have to do is focus. All they have to do is say, hey, county, yeah, we see your strategy. We know what you want to do. We can help, because I think they will. So to Commissioner Morgan's point earlier, I think these type of partnerships are integral. And I don't know how a lot of the other commissioners think about it, because we can't sit down with 7 people in a room over any kind of beverage and have fun talking about this stuff or dig into it. It's impossible. We can't do it. So it's like herding cats. What I would say is once we develop that strategy, I think we can do some broken field running. And when we do, we could be a model for Polk County. We can be a model for Sarpy. We can be a model for all of these people who are scratching their head right now and going, how do we deal with it? So that $55.4 million in my book, it's earmarked for community mental health. Question is, how do we do it? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
Chair, despite some reservations I'll share as well, I do want to commend and thank board leadership and Director Myers and Sherry as well for bringing this issue to the forefront, getting creative on how can we address the issues before us. And I'm hopeful that these robust discussions will lead us in the right direction. So with that being said, and kind of building off of some of the things Commissioner Friend was saying, the 2 options before us that include building new buildings do make me quite nervous, and I do have reservations with the building new buildings part of things, with the kind of cloud in mind of the different ways that we will be losing revenue in the near future as a county, how the budget's getting tight, of course, looming recession, inflation, et cetera. So, but on top of that, going back to the need for that comprehensive plan that Commissioner Friend was alluding to,
kind of really strategizing comprehensively as not just Douglas County itself, but all stakeholders involved in mental health in the community. You know, what are those big voids that we need to fill collectively? How are we partnering with key partners and stakeholders in the area of mental health in our community? You know, since we first approved the first study that we're talking about now, there's been various announcements of new mental health initiatives in the community. I know Emmanuel announced a new mental health initiative more geared towards youth and adolescents, which is also important, of course. It may keep some of our kids hopefully out of the youth detention center. Community Alliance announced a new mental health building and initiative which will treat adults in the community. Of course, UNMC has been mentioned a few times. So how are we strategizing and building those partnerships so that we're all collectively working on mental health together, strategically, smartly in the community? So some of the things that I personally am leaning towards that I can support is definitely an investment in mental health, as Commissioner Friend was stating. More so would love to see options around renovating current vacant space or space that will be vacant in the near future that is already under county ownership. You know, using 10, 20, 30 million to renovate a building can go a long way in a current space. Having that strong focus on prevention, pre-adjudication, diversion programs that are mental health related, so that to keep people out of the jail before they even get into the jail. You know, those are the kind of things that I would really love to see a focus on. So perhaps some kind of option 3 added to the options of some kind of renovation and focus in that area. So to me also, maybe even a split of 2/3 of this funding going towards such a renovation and mental health expansion in the community. And then maybe 1/3 supporting other mental health initiatives that are key partners for us, like Community Alliance. I know Completely Kids is launching a mental health center for adolescents as well. You know, how are we all seeing the big picture and trying to be as strategic as possible? And that's a hard thing to do for us, but I appreciate these robust discussions again, and thank you all for your leadership on this.
Okay.
I was doing it.
Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to back my way in from the points that Commissioner Friend and Commissioners Friend and Garcia said in that respect. I think everybody believes in the partnering piece, but I think if our concern is cost, right now, how I envision this after reading it is that basically you're putting together a new building. All the existing costs transfer into a new building, and we're talking about building a building. You bring UNMC into it, highly qualified, but that's not coming for free. So the way I'm hearing it is implying as if you partner with UNMC, that's going to reduce the cost. UNMC costs, and that is an addition in what we do now. How I interpret that is, how I interpret in this, which is a point I want to make later about just the naming of this study. You're going to take, we're going to build a building to some degree and take the existing staff we have and money and funding and program, and it comes in. Now, the point of existing buildings, I don't know an existing building that we own that's capable of that. And not saying that the study shouldn't look at it, but I'd bet a whole lot on the fact that you're not going to find a building around here that we can convert that doesn't cost more than what we have on hand. And it just makes sense to build new now because of the structures that we have, whatever that newness is. Now, I want to go back to even the name of this thing, which you call the Douglas County Mental Health Facility Study. And I want to stick here because I want to focus on how this gets framed and how it's heard. It is a mental health facility study. Doesn't say anything about corrections. The only thing it says about corrections is people that are there, which we have been talking about for more than half the time that I've been on this board. It seems like you're talking about a mental health facility, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, which is to serve the mentally ill. But you're just coming in through 2 realms. You're either coming through a traditional realm, through a health realm, or you got identified because you did something through the mental health system, but you're not coming here because you committed a crime. You're coming here to solve your mental health issue. So putting it in 2 buildings or not is not the issue. You're still gonna have that. When I look at this, it's shared, it's one entry, there's not a separate piece. If you're talking about detox, you're not talking about building a jail because you can't get reimbursed for detox in a jail. So that's the main thing that I think we need to understand here in the framing. It cannot, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, it cannot even be close to a correctional facility because you don't get reimbursed for being in a correctional facility. And am I wrong?
Commissioner, what the reason we talk about detox beds in the correctional portion of this, or mental health beds, period, is that they are already in that jail right now, detoxing. Well over, I'm going to guesstimate an average of about 150 people a month come in.
But we don't get paid.
We don't.
Exactly.
Because they're charged. So, you know, there are also people who end up, you know, in the county's detox on North Downtown.
Which is different.
You know, but we also have people who come in and are detoxing because they're criminally charged at the time that they were, and they were under the influence at the time that they were arrested. We don't have a space that's designed for them. And it places a tremendous pressure on our infirmary because that's where they are. You know, that's where they are along with all of our the suicide watches. Most of the suicide watches are in our infirmary. Most of the detox is in our infirmary. So our medically fragile people that the infirmary was designed for are almost crowded out by these populations these days. So this would be a separate space designed specifically for the provision of detox and mental health services, but these people are also in jail.
Let me clear you up. Let me before the time run, because I want to make sure on that. That's my point. I just want to reiterate in the framing of this when this goes to the next level. We're not talking about building a correctional facility, because right now, if we took somebody out of that correctional facility and served them at a hospital, technically, you get on the clock to get reimbursed because they're outside the facility.
Correct.
That's the point I want to make to this. We're not building a correctional facility. You're building a mental health facility that will allow us to serve the mentally ill. You can't get reimbursed building a jail. So anything somebody says with that is flat factually wrong.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyle?
So when I hear the discussions here, and I still feel like this whole process, we're not really defining our scope really well yet. With all due respect to Mr. Bavandra, that was an architect and engineering look at facilities. I know that there have been discussions with internal groups within the county just to see what the true needs are. So is our scope really figuring out what the county as an entity needs, or are we trying to really be the end all to be all for the community itself? And there's a lot of overlap there, but there's a lot of cost that goes into that too. So I feel like we're almost back to square one, to be honest with you. We're trying to figure out what's our scope. Do we want to just see what our mandates are? What do we have to do? And then fund that, because it's going to be really difficult to fund every single thing everybody wants to get done in the community. So I almost feel like we need a 20,000 foot view again of what do we have access to in our community, looking at the hospital systems, looking at the separate types of organizations that offer those types of services, and then start saying, okay, well, this we do need something for corrections. That's without a doubt as part of our obligation as county members, county board members. So, but what do we need that goes beyond that is not mandated? It's, to be honest with you, we have to do something that is fiscally responsible, but really hits the needs of those that are the most fragile in our community. And we may not be able to be the end all to do all to everybody, but we do have to take care of those basic needs.
All right. So I think, again, all of this discussion, I'm going to use Commissioner Garcia's robust discussion is good, and that's the point of us kind of getting off the dime and moving forward with getting answers to those questions. And I envision if this moves forward, to have public hearings. We can schedule 4 right away, have those robust discussions with the community to have them look at what we're doing. I personally value what staff who are currently doing the job have to say about all of this. And as far as the stigma goes, I mean, Commissioner Rogers said it well, where, you know, we're serving people with, we're serving people with mental illness that happen to be from or going potentially into the correctional facility with our current staff who are amazing and do phenomenal work. They have worked well together for a number of years on how do they collaborate. As far as the stigma goes, you know, I've been in these discussions for a very long time, and I get frustrated when people bring that up because I can flip the coin. And I can flip the coin that we're stigmatizing those who are in our correctional facility with mental illness that, oh boy, can't touch you, or can't have anybody from the community come close to you because you're an incarcerated person with mental illness. To me, that's just as bad of a example of stigma. But what we're trying to do with this, and again, the discussions I think will show, is that we're getting rid of that discussion. And we could be potentially the leader in how do we work together with mental health services for folks, and yes, for folks that are incarcerated as well. I envision and hope to have conversations where we have that assessment center before they even enter a door to determine which door they should go into. So I'm excited about this. I think that, again, we have talked and worked, and again, I give credit to really the two staffs who are doing the work on this issue for all these years, and this allowing us the opportunity to get all of our questions and the scope and where do we want to go from here and how do we want to do it. We actually could be looked at on a national level of the leaders in how to address this. And so, again, I hope that we move forward, that I'll schedule the public hearings ASAP. We'll work with what that, again, scope should be, could be, will be, and all those other questions that keep coming up from the very beginning when we started to talk about this. So with that, there's no other commissioner lights, but is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom that would like to comment? Doug?
Good morning. Doug Kagan, 416 South 130th Street, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. The county mental health population seeking help has increased from 2016 to 2021 by 1,000% in the extreme acuity category and 350% in the high acuity category, according to a mental health facility study. So there definitely exists an obvious need for a newer combined facility. Projected costs range from $44 million to $59 million. We believe a new high-rise facility envisioned by commissioners would raise property taxes for county residents. Commissioners are considering using $55 million of county federal pandemic recovery money to pay for construction. However, then commissioners must decide how and where to fund its ongoing operations, considering inflation and difficulty in hiring professional employees. The plan must factor in an imminent recession, material shortages, and delivery problems. Because of difficulty finding licensed therapists and other healthcare professionals to fill open positions at the county jail, logical to believe it would be similarly difficult to find such employees for a new standalone mental health facility. Based on the study completed this April, commissioners will decide what to build and where to locate it. The county now is considering only two options. One, to combine a community mental health facility with a corrections building, The second to create 2 separate facilities, one for community mental health and another for corrections mental health. Downtown property is expensive, and demolition expenditures would increase the cost. The study invites adjacent neighbor property owner comment on a new facility, so a downtown venue would not win approval because nearby neighbors previously complained about the juvenile center proximity to the corrections facility driving away commercial traffic. Businesses and residents near a downtown site surely would object to its location as a threat to their customer base and safe living conditions. The 2 options offered by the mental health facility studies are not conducive to taxpayer support because total cost would lie with county property taxpayers. The tax-paying public, amazingly not yet consulted about site locations or other elements, though planning a facility already has begun through an initial study, similar to how the county board handled the new juvenile detention center and court expansion surreptitiously. Because mental health is an issue everywhere, commissioners should investigate making a joint interlocal agreement with UNMC, CHI Health, or adjacent counties in order to share costs. Commissioners could investigate these options to build and or operate a joint mental health center. The joint facility could sit on county-owned property at the health center with additions to the existing structure at the former County Youth Detention Center at 42nd and Woolworth Avenue, or at another agreed-upon site elsewhere. We strongly urge commissioners to slow deliberations, explore these other options, and invite immediate public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
I'm Dennis Schleiss at 4512 Hickory Street. I and my family live close to the county campus on 42nd and can see how there is room there to construct a new mental health center. This location also is very close to the UNMC area, so common sense can tell us that the county should work with UNMC to find a way to either build or add on to an existing building at either location that could serve county residents and medical center patients. We're looking at tough economic times ahead, and putting a property tax burden on county families will only cause us additional financial pain. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. You might think I'm a little ridiculous here today, but I've had some experience with social services and people in mental health situations, and one person referring you to another person and that person referring you to somebody else. But as I listened to everybody this morning, particularly Mr. Friend, and I thank him for his comments. When I was growing up, I remember reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and seeing the movie. I also remember going to college and studying 1984 and seeing the movie 1984 and the movie Soylent Green. And those come to my mind today, particularly when we were talking about that expanse down here called UNMC. It used to be this small between Saddle Creek, Leavenworth, not even to Leavenworth, 42nd Street, not quite to 42nd Street. Farm Street, no, not quite, because there was something else there. But now it goes way out, way out. You're getting ready to tear down more buildings on the other side of Saddle Creek. I'm sorry, that's the city, I guess. But you've destroyed, the city and county have destroyed a lot of buildings that could have been used for this type of thing. And we have a Douglas County Health Center that's probably going to have to be torn down, something built there. So I don't understand the real problem here. We can't solve all of society's ills, but we can pass ordinances and talk about mental illness, and we can pass things that say, oh, well, Larry might be a little touched. I saw him messing around in his yard with an upside down flag. We need to send a co-responder out there and maybe take him in for an assessment. Ladies and gentlemen, you're getting into areas that the founders of this Constitution never envisioned. It might be your right because you are living in a state, but it's not your right to impound people in their freedoms. Think of when poor little Edward G. Robinson is put in that little room with the nice little video and given a little shot. We're going to help you pass away very serenely to very serene music. Think of Charlton Heston looking at those burning furnaces there. The body bags are going up the gangway to be disposed of. They couldn't solve all of society's problems either. There's always somebody behind the microphone, behind the screen, that's controlling things. We don't need to be a national thing here, and we don't need guidance from national people. How many experts do we have down there at UNMC? How many other locations? Why aren't we all together with the solutions if we're so smart? I grew up thinking that our government was smart. As I get older, I find out none of our governments are very smart. Human nature, but you just can't legislate it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Nicole LeClaire. You might remember me, some of you. I came to many, many meetings, starting with the Juvenile Justice Center, my mom as well. And I'm still watching regularly and taking notes and telling people all about what's going on. I want to commend you, Commissioner Borgeson and Commissioner Friend, for hearing that you want to be a leader in this current plan. Because when it came to the Juvenile Justice Center, what we regularly heard is you were going to go to King County, you're going to go to Minnesota, and hear what those people had to say. And what I regularly said when I got up here is, hey, Omaha's a great town. We have incredible people in this town. Why aren't we the leaders? We have land that those big cities do not have. So I'm really glad to hear that some thinking is changing. And we have incredible citizens. What I learned about 4 or 5 meetings a week during those 4 years is that the citizens of Omaha are amazing, and we're not listening to them. And I look at the Juvenile Justice Center, and I look at the businesses that are gone, and how it is affecting business, and how you all said it would not. You know, I know it's a pandemic, of course, I got a mask on. But this has affected things, whether you like it or not. If it was a great thing for cities, more cities would put juvenile justice centers right in the middle of downtown. So this is not a good thing. And I'm looking at what might happen over on Leavenworth and those businesses with this plan. And I really hope that you work with your citizens, because I really think the more we all work together, we can have a great city. But I drive around Omaha and I see dirt pile after dirt pile after dirt pile. I'm ashamed of what's going on in our city. So I really hope you can use the buildings that we already have. You know, be creative, think outside of the box. I was just down at UNMC's clinic down on 13th and Leavenworth. That is an old building. It's a beautiful building, what they did inside. There's no reason. We talk about climate and what we're doing to the climate. You knock down buildings, that is very hard on our climate. So try to think outside of the box. I'm so happy to hear, Commissioner Borgeson, that you want to have meetings with the citizens, because I do think there are a lot of people who have a lot to say, and I just really, I've watched during the pandemic all these things going through with developers, and over they say they're going to have meetings, they're going to listen to the citizens, and I watch on item after item after the Juvenile Justice Center. Our leaders are not being leaders. They are not listening to the citizens. I don't know who they're listening to. I have a feeling it's developers and money. But you are not listening to the people. And it's going to affect our future. If you could just slow down, listen to people, really engage your wonderful constituents, we will have an amazing city. But right now, I just see destruction, and I hope you can stop and, really take in what's going on. So thank you for letting me speak.
Anyone else wishing to speak during this? I do want to make a couple of corrections, or not corrections, but I guess comments. I think that the more we talk about this, a better understanding, because there were a lot of comments from some of the speakers that clearly they don't understand what we currently do. People are talking as if we're starting something brand new, when, again, I said it and I'm going to say it again. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but we have been doing this for many years. Our community mental health center has been embedded into our nursing home since 1970. That is not good. A nursing home is a place where people live. That's their home. And there has been talk over the years to move the community mental health center out of the health center for that very purpose. And then we keep hearing about the partners like UNMC. I'm not against having partners, but I get frustrated because everybody's forgetting we have staff currently that have been doing this again since we've had our community mental health center since 1970. So we aren't creating something new. We're actually trying to we are trying to use the resources we currently have more collectively and better and together. And so these conversations, I think, will be good, because this area, I'm definitely hearing that most people really don't understand what we currently do and how they work together. But then how can we engage even further in using and collaborating those resources together? And again, utilizing current and long-term, in some cases, staff that have been doing this for a very long time. So again, I think for us to get from moving along, I hope that we would be able to move forward with phase 2 and address some of these issues that have been brought forth today. I'll say it again, I am very, very excited about being the leader in addressing this issue and seeing what we can do together moving forward. Commissioner Morgan, did you still want to say something?
Yes. I just want to ask a couple questions, and maybe they're not very relevant. How many square feet do we occupy currently? About, is it around 10 to 15,000 at our 42nd Street facility?
I think we have that. It's in the chart.
I have that somewhere. On page 13, we talk about the outpatient clinic and the day treatment clinic. The outpatient clinic is about 7,500 on the main level. The day treatment is another 3,000, so there's about 10,500 plus on the main level. And then on the 5th floor, there's about 19,750 square feet total.
19,000.
19,750, that
Okay.
entire 5th floor.
And that's all used for mental health?
Yes, that's
entire.
That's the entire mental health use of that health center campus.
Okay. So at the present time with that, I got it about 26,000 thereabouts, 27,000. And I'm not sure what the new need would be. The way we're, I think, helping on the mental health now is they're going to the correction facility. Am I accurate on that, Commissioner Borgeson?
If they're brought in by law enforcement, like, say someone is out on the corner and they're disrupting the peace, and you can definitely say they have a mental health illness. They're brought into the jail. They're arrested for disturbing the peace or whatever it might be. This is just one example of many. But yes, then they're brought into the jail and serviced, not only for what they were brought into, but for their mental illness.
And then our person, staff under Sherry, and who does a great job of caring and passion toward it. That's where they would go to meet with them currently.
Potentially, depending on what program, right now, what program they have collectively doing together, they will work together to see if that person who is in the jail would benefit in one of these programs. But
Okay.
we actually have mental health staff in corrections that we contract with to provide services to those mentally ill that are in the correction facility right now.
Not employees, but people we
We
contract.
contract with.
Okay.
But then we have community mental health center folks who equate to almost 50%, close to 50% of that staff is working closely with corrections on these programs to see if we can move and serve those within our correction facility better and I guess more appropriately in mental health services than in corrections.
Okay, and then lastly, when you talk about having these meetings, where would we have those? Do you think we'd have them here on an afternoon or?
Well, I think we'd have to
Thursday
change
or whatever?
Yeah, we'd have to change sometimes. I think we could have some in the evening. We could have one, in the afternoon. I think we want to be a little bit
Right.
not just at 9 o'clock in the morning, because everybody can't come at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I think having the public meetings is really important, and we need to work to be sure that we schedule those in different areas, and I think that can be very helpful. So right now, if we vote to approve this, we're not really moving ahead with it. We'll have probably a meeting to discuss, hey, what's the real scope of this? And what's the cost to do this? Is that what
I'm sorry,
we'd be
1
doing?
minute. Yep, we would be moving forward with identifying or solidifying what Phase 2 really means and the details of that.
Okay.
Commissioner Rogers?
I'd move to move forward with Phase 2 with the specific inclusion of at a minimum 4 community meetings to gauge public interest.
Okay, is there a second? There's a motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes, I think PJ brought up some good points about the scope and the time and the cost on this. I mean, there's nothing in this that says anything about any of those things. And I just want to understand, when we say we're moving forward with Phase 2, are we authorizing some scope or time or cost that's
I
not
do have a scope.
articulated?
That I can hand out.
Yes, we have one side of one page relative to this.
And again, this is getting to the point of addressing not a specific solution, but looking at solutions, including that being any.
So this is news to us.
This is the proposed
All right.
scope of work.
It would have been great to see this,
What I'm talking about is workshop.
before right now.
Workshop
And
means.
I appreciate it. This is good information. And the timeline on this, like, are we talking about getting a work product from you in a month or 2 months, or is there a timeline, in your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that I'm here working for you, so I am willing to do what you'd like. I would assume that it's complicated. There's a lot of different opinions in directions and way to go. I feel I have a good grasp of what you have going on now and what the staff said that they would like to see going forward, but the solution is going to take some time. It's complicated. I certainly don't have a solution in mind. I think I would need your help to solidify that. So to answer your question, I would assume it would be through the fall. I would, the other thing to think
That's
about.
fine. I mean, I'm talking in terms of time, months,
Right.
if I understand you, going through the fall, is kind of a time frame. We don't have a time specific, like you would be back to us with a report on phase 2 by December 1st. But months anyhow is the time thing. And finally, the cost factor. And there was a payment made to you on the phase 1 report.
Correct.
What was that amount? Just
35.
35,000.
And that included our partners, Altus. So we shared that.
Okay.
And what I had proposed is, and again, the problem with the fee is, what are we doing? Are we doing soil borings? Are we purchasing land? Are we hiring a real estate agent? So all those things are unknown at this point.
Right.
But I did propose something in the mid-20s, and I gave a range of 22 to 28,000 for our services, not including additional consultants, which again might be soil borings. It might be if you're purchasing land, which you may not do, but hiring a real estate agent to look for property, et cetera, which I just did for the state. So that's basically. The other thing I think on timing is important to note is what I had heard, and I don't know if this is true. I had heard this talking to Mr. Leahy, is that the funds have to be expended by 2026.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that means December 31st, 2026. And so in our study on page 38, we created a timeline to have, and again, this was pie in the sky because we didn't know what the project was, but it's just laying out some milestones and steps that you need to take to expend that money by the end of 2026. So again, delaying, if you decide to do something and you want to use this money, delaying it for a long period of time, it might be impacting the ability to spend the money.
I appreciate that.
1 minute.
I guess we're in the ballpark for a scope document here, which I perused briefly, and it looks to be fairly adequate. Maybe there's some things that could go on that. We're flexible on that, I presume. And the time would be some months hence, allowing us to do information gathering, public hearings, and all the input that we talked about. And the cost would be somewhere, did you say, in the 20s?
Yes.
Okay.
Mid-20s.
Those seem to be reasonable general parameters. Are those incorporated in the motion that we're talking about generally?
No, but they can be.
In a subsequent motion? Okay.
Yeah, subsequent.
Yeah.
Not spending any.
We're not doing anything. This is like an intent resolution. Yes.
Time. Commissioner Garcia?
So maybe I missed it, but just as a point of clarification, voting yes on this is voting for continued services at an additional cost, or this is all a part of the 35,000 originally spent?
It's additional.
Okay.
It's additional cost.
So when we vote yes, hypothetically, do we know what that additional cost is?
That is where I would ask that the motion does include that we move forward with phase 2 with a range of dollars for $22,000 to $28,000 for phase 2. No?
I'd like to amend it to say not to.
Or not to exceed, that's what I was looking for.
Not to exceed $30,000. And I really respect you having to deal with us, especially me. But I thank you, and I think that we'd say that that's what we do. And I think one thing I'd like to see is at least talk about, for example, the 72nd and Mercy Road, where I understand that's going to be a community mental health facility, that we learn more about it, can bring that up to the public when we have public meetings, and invite some others there that may want to participate, whether it's CHI or anyone else, so that we see, hey, how can we do this with our people, and maybe they're gonna contribute too, instead of us having to get separate contracts with others to help down at our facility or wherever it might be. So that'll be future discussions.
Okay, and we still need a contract, so this would just be moving forward for that purpose, but that would come back to this board. And I'm sorry, but Commissioner Garcia, you got kind of interrupted
Yeah, no,
here,
you're
so
good.
could you continue
It's by my
on?
neighbor, so it's okay. No, I just really wanted that point of clarification on, was this voting on an actual cost or not? Sounds like there would be an additional cost. So this phase two, very briefly, would explore all the cards on the table, whether it's the two options presented of a new building, whether it's no building, no development at all, whether it's possibly a renovation of something or other. All cards are still on the table. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm acting as the facilitator. I'm along for the journey, and I'm hoping to engage as many of you as possible in this because I need your help.
Okay, very good. In with my slight conservative tendencies on some fiscal matters, right, Commissioner Friend, I would think that we could engage constituents with some public discussion and hearings, through our own kind of personnel and not needing to spend more on that. But hearing that all cards are still on the table and for the sake of being collegial, I will support this.
Okay, any other? There is a motion to move forward with phase two. A contract will be brought back to this board for approval, and details of outlining the financial commitment we will make for that phase two.
Madam Chair, if I may, the motion is just to utilize Carlson Wesper Bonder Architects for phase two of the mental health space study? Nothing else?
Nope.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right, please. There was a motion by Commissioner Rogers, seconded by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
One moment, please. Okay, thank you.
Just a brief question. Can I, so at your next meeting, do you want me to have a formal contract to look at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'll try to be more precise on incorporating your comments.
Yep.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Human Resources, the weekly personnel report from Civil Service as presented. Nothing on legislation at this time. We do have need for an executive session for labor negotiations. Sorry. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Friend. Please vote.
Like that.
Motion passes 6-0. Commissioner Kavanaugh is currently absent. Thank you.
Record.
Motion passes 7-0. We're adjourned at 12:50 PM.